Chapter 30:15. At the same time, Prince Emo narrowed his eyes and moved like a rainbow flashing across the moon. Raven Moon was dyed with a speck of pitch-black cold light, and it cleaved a scarlet flame chain towards the water snake Zhao Guochang in front of her. After a loud splash, a scarlet wall of fire rose up from the water and burned fiercely in the night. At the same time, Duan Yu's raven bone fan also moved. Thousands of cold specks flew out and formed a circular encirclement, abruptly attacking Zhao Guochang's chest. These two people suddenly attacked almost without warning. Following this set of movements, they flew down and rushed behind Zhao Guochang like lightning. Zhao Guochang was shocked almost instantly. He simply couldn't believe that these two people would attack him for no reason under everyone's watchful eyes. However, there was no time for him to ponder. Raven Moon's sword light had already broken through Zhao Guochang's defenses and arrived in front of him. Zhao Guochang's eyes darkened, and he shouted angrily. A scale-like defensive item quickly formed on his chest, and he shouted, "Punk! You want to kill me? You're still too chi." A scorching flame attacked Zhao Guochang's chest. He originally thought that this godly armor could absolutely block any attack from these two juniors. Unfortunately, Zhao Guochang truly overestimated himself. Bam! He was sent flying by that fierce flame and retreated several steps. When he looked back in horror, he saw the water snake's sinister head peeking out from behind his head. Its gaping maw sent chills down one's spine. Zhao Guochang's body suddenly shrank, only to hear a kacha sound of bones breaking, accompanied by a sharp pain. Zhao Guochang only felt that his left shoulder was almost completely torn off, the pain causing his whole body to tremble. "Mr. Zhao!" Goen couldn't resist shrieking. Mr. Zhao, this deity realm expert, was her greatest reliance on this trip. Now Mr. Zhao was beaten half to death by two juniors before they even entered the mystic realm. How could she endure this? Pfft! Mr. Zhao spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. With a roar, he stretched out his other uninjured arm and used all his strength to support the water snake's ferocious head. The big water snake hissed twice, and its body couldn't help but twist twice, throwing out huge waves. Its pair of triangular eyes coldly stared at Zhao Guochang in front of it. Zhao Guochang was in so much pain that his body trembled slightly. Just as he was about to call for his spirit beast, the thousands of cold lights had already arrived in front of him. Without any delay, they shot into his body. With a series of muffled sounds, Zhao Guochang's body was like a sieve that had been shot through. Small light spots appeared on his body one after another. Then, like a ball that had leaked air, his body began to gasp for air. Holding a long staff, Holy Sun Mi Yin stared blankly at the scene before him. Fuck. There was almost no room for him to react. It had only been 3 minutes since Emo Lian and Duan Yu joined hands. Yet Zhao Guochang was already shot into a sieve. His entire body was covered in blood and bubbling with blood. No, it wasn't? This wasn't right. Holy Sun Mi Yin blankly thought. Just now, he clearly told everyone to join hands to deal with that big water snake. But why did the two of them? How did they attack Zhao Guochang? Before this, the two of them didn't give any warning, and he had never seen them discuss it with each other. This tacit understanding was too terrifying. That's it for now. We'll continue at midnight. Prepare to burn incense for the new year. Pray that I'll be prosperous in the coming year. Chapter 30:16. Sir Jojo watched the scene before him with sparkling eyes. He abruptly turned around and punched Madame Goen's face. "No one will protect you now." Madame Goen was startled, and she reflexively bounced back before reflexively blocking with her hand. Bam! The defensive shield on her hand was instantly shattered by Arbor's punch, and she was sent flying backward by the force of the impact. Madame Goen crashed heavily into a wooden window on the side of the ship, and flew in through the broken window, before smashing onto the ground. She was dumbstruck for a moment. What? She was actually punched into the cabin from the outside by the little girl? Everyone stared at the little girl dumbfoundedly, unable to speak for a long time. The little girl's bad habit of taking action as soon as she said she wanted to. It was simply shocking. Wait, shouldn't they be allies right now? Evidently, in the little girl's eyes, people like Madame Goen couldn't be considered her allies at all. Previously at the Three River Pier, The little girl hadn't been able to find a chance to deal a vicious blow to Madame Goen, due to the protection of that deity realm expert, Mr. Zhao. However, this didn't mean that she had forgotten the previous incident. Even Queen Fu Sha, who didn't mind the commotion, couldn't help but shudder. She didn't expect this girl to be so ruthless. Moreover, it had been a while since the incident, yet she was still bent on teaching Madame Goen a lesson. Xiao Mu stomped over and circled into the cabin through the hole in the window. She coldly said, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." Everyone, fuck. It was clearly such a vicious incident, but why did they feel like laughing? It's impolite not to reciprocate. Why did these words sound so familiar? Didn't the little fellow already nag about it when she was teaching Madame Goen a lesson? Could it be that the lesson from the first half wasn't over yet, and it continued until today, and the lesson only ended in the second half? Queen Fu Sha twitched her mouth with an odd expression. She recalled that they had merely eaten the other party's barbecue, but the freaking little stoic made them vomit for a full 10 hours. 10 hours. Now, whenever her subordinates saw someone barbecue, their hair would stand on end, and they would keep a respectful distance. This was simply throwing up psychological trauma. In the future, even if the barbecue was placed in front of them, they probably wouldn't be able to eat it. What a shameless little pervert. Queen Fu Sha cursed in her heart. At this time, Arbor had already walked to Madame Goen's side. Looking at her frightened eyes, he twirled the long sword in his hand. "I let you go again and again. Do you think I'm afraid of you? You, what do you want? You, don't act recklessly. If the great emperor knows. If you know, then you know." Arbor plunged his sword into Madame Goen's thigh. Madame Goen was in so much pain that she sat upright. She twisted her body in fear and crawled backward. "You don't come over, don't come over." Arbor reached out and gently pulled out the sword from her leg. He asked coldly, "Have you thought about how you want to die?" A few drops of dark red blood fell from the sword, but there was not a single red mark on the sword. Madame Goen's eyes widened in shock as she stared blankly at the little girl in front of her. "Yellow goat. Huang Yang." Madame Goen seemed to have thought of something and shouted loudly. Chapter 30:17. Arbor glanced at her contemptuously. "Don't shout. It's useless even if you shout until your throat breaks." The little fellow used her sword to draw 2 lines in front of her chest. "I'm afraid that Mr. Zhao of yours is already dead. Now it's your turn." Arbor saw that she had one hand behind her back. She knew that she was up to no good, and that she was definitely up to something. Sir Jojo only looked at the woman in front of him expressionlessly. He did not say anything. Duan Muqing stepped in from outside the hole and hurriedly called out to her. "Jojo, is there some trouble?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Madame Goen, who was lying on the ground, suddenly straighten her body and roared. "Little slut, I'll let you have a taste of my power." Madame Goen's eyes were filled with vicious anger. She stretched out her hand and waved a handful of powder. Duan Muqing hurriedly rushed forward. He originally thought that the little girl would be caught off guard and suffer a great loss. Who knew? The little girl was already prepared. She calmly took out a black frying pan from her inner world and slapped it directly on Madame Goen's face. With a loud bang, Madame Goen let out a miserable cry and fell backwards. Her big head heavily knocked against the deck of the boat, making a loud thud. The frying pan swatted away most of the powder, leaving only a small portion floating in front of Arbor. However, Sir Jojo was very guarded against this woman. He had already set up several layers of defense around himself without leaving a trace. Therefore, Madame Goen's little bit of powder was unable to break through her defense and be absorbed into her body. At this time, Duan Muqing had already arrived in front of Arbor. He anxiously grabbed her arm. "Jojo, are you alright? What can happen to me?" Sir Jojo said expressionlessly. He used the frying pan to slap Madame Goen's face again. "The one who's not alright is this fellow." Duan Muqing looked at the little fellow in front of him speechlessly. He coughed lightly and nodded. Looking at this lady's pitiful appearance, it was obvious that she did not get any benefits from Jojo. Madame Goen suddenly burst into tears. Crown Princess, you can't kill me." "The Crown Princess? I am the Crown Prince's aunt. If you kill me, How can you face the Empress in the future? Crown Princess, I know I was wrong. Why don't you spare me this time, Crown Princess? Madame Goen cried with snot and tears. The scene was a bit funny. Xiao Mu's cold gaze swept over her, and she involuntarily creased her brows when she saw this fellow crying to this extent. She had never seen such a situation before. If this national security agency insisted on fighting with her to the end, she would just kill her. But now he was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy while crying out loud. It was really a bit of an eyesore. The little fellow pursed his little mouth and forcefully flung his sleeve that was grabbed by Madame Goen. He expressionlessly turned around and walked towards the deck. Stinking shameless thing. He was already so old, but he was still crying like a baby. In the future, when he saw Sir Jojo, he had to hurry and take a detour. Don't talk nonsense all day. Arbor had just arrived on the deck when she saw the big water snake, creating a 3-meter-tall splash of water. It was like a raging wave that came towards her. She did not panic at all. She only glanced at the wave indifferently. Then, she raised her small hand and drew a circle of defensive array glyphs around her. Sleep, come back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Chapter 30:18. Bang! While water splashed everywhere, Arbor had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. The teleportation talisman flashed and disappeared, allowing Arbor to suddenly stand on the ship's railing. The river breeze brushed against Arbor's face, and her skirt fluttered. Arbor's black hair fluttered slightly, and the 3-foot-long sword in her hand glinted coldly. Her icy eyes had already met the great snake's gloomy eyes. Hiss! The little white snake on her wrist swiftly slithered, and abruptly opened its towering mouth, biting at the oncoming great water snake. That great water snake certainly didn't expect the little girl to have a great void great snake, sacred beast coiled around her body. It seemed to be taken aback for a split second, and its snake head abruptly tilted to the side as it retreated in alarm. However, it was already too late. The little white snake's towering snake head had already lifted up, and its mouth bit down on the great water snake's vital point, like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds. Chi! The great water snake hissed and swayed its body repeatedly, retreating with all its might in alarm, wanting to continue retreating back into the river to hide. At this time, the little white snake had already transformed into a great void serpent several dozen meters long. So how could it allow this guy to continue escaping? The little white snake opened its mouth and bit down on a square inch below the great water snake's head. In less than a few seconds, black smoke billowed out from the water snake's body, eyes and mouth in wisps. That appearance was a bit frightening. After Mo Lien and the others finished dealing with the nightcaw birds below, they turned around to look at the ship's railing. They saw the little stoic standing there like an expressionless little puppet. Her pitch-black eyes didn't move in the slightest under the night sky, and a great white snake several dozen meters long was loosely coiled around her several times in several coils of its tail. Its abdomen moved as it swallowed the water snake in front of it inch by inch. Holy Sun Mi Yin couldn't help but shudder at that terrifying appearance. The students of the other academies couldn't help but scatter like birds and beasts, shivering as they hid behind the destroyed cabins and by the broken wooden windows, watching the scene in front of them in horror. Fuck! What kind of beast was this beside the little stoic? It could actually swallow a level 10 divine beast alive without any hesitation? Wasn't this too cruel? On the other hand, Xiaomu creased her brows. Seeing that the white snakelet had already swallowed 2/3 of the large water snake, its stomach rumbling, she couldn't resist stroking the white snakelet as she muttered to herself. Too full, spit it out. Finally, the little white snake swallowed the big water snake whole, including its skin and bones. The snake's belly bulged, and it even burped a few times. Crown Prince Mo and Duan Yu looked at each other, both at a loss for words. Burp. The little white snake suddenly shrank inch by inch, and its body returned to its original slender appearance. However, its abdomen was still bulging, as if it was several months pregnant. Burp. Its pitiful pair of large, watery eyes looked straight at Xiao Mu. Arbor couldn't help but knock on its head. I told you to eat too much, but you didn't vomit when I told you to. You got indigestion from being greedy, so who are you blaming? Sir Jojo quickly took out several bottles of digestion pills from her inner world and fed the little white snake one by one. As she fed it, she discovered that the little white snake's head slowly drooped down and curled up in her hand, unmoving. Arbor jumped in fright and quickly poked it with her finger. Ming Ming! Ming Ming! The little fellow was a bit anxious and poked it with her finger again. Chapter 30:19. Ming Ming. At this time, Emolian and Duanyu had already jumped out of the water. Under the night wind, the water droplets on their bodies were slightly flung off, and with the evaporation of spiritual energy, the water droplets on their clothes instantly dried. Jojo, don't be anxious. Emolian flashed to her side and gently grasped her hand. The little white snake swallowed a level 10 divine beast's flesh and crystal core, so it needs some time to digest. I reckon this sacred beast is about to advance, Duanyu said. Master, it looks like Ming Ming is about to advance. Put it on planet Shaji for its advancement. The sapling Qiuqiu's words soon confirmed their conjecture. Xiaomu nodded and fed the white snakelet several more pills to aid in digestion and advancement. Only then did she put it away on Shaji planet and have the sapling Qiuqiu find an open space for it to prepare for its advancement. Qiuqiu solemnly said, Master, Ming Ming will probably need to sleep for a while. That divine beast is very helpful for its advancement, but it needs some time just to digest it. At this time, Arbor also discovered that the great ape on Fish Orchid Planet was pounding its chest and stamping its feet while howling at the sky. Arbor expressionlessly communicated with the sapling mentally. What is it doing? Qiuqiu chuckled mischievously. The great ape is at the pinnacle of spirit beasts, so it needs some divine beast bloodline to advance. Realization dawned on Arbor. He didn't expect that the little white snake would swallow a level 10 divine beast in one go, so it naturally couldn't squeeze out any bloodline. Arbor was a bit curious. Does a spirit beast have to have a divine beast bloodline to advance to a divine beast? Of course. The sapling quickly explained to the little Master. Master, divine beasts aren't everywhere. Normally, they need a bloodline inheritance. It's even harder to find a sacred beast bloodline. Even if their ancestors have a sacred beast bloodline, not every one of them can become a sacred beast. The probability is still very small. However, if the ancestor does not have such a bloodline, then there is not even such a small probability. Arbor nodded. Oh, tell it to stop howling. We'll find another one for it later. She had many small beasts that were top-grade spirit beasts by her side. If that was the case, she would have to find a few more divine beasts for them to advance. Master Silver, little white snake has gone to evolve. Do you want to bring Qiuqiu out with you? Your master isn't that weak. The little stoic said expressionlessly. Soon after, she thought for a bit and brought out the blue spirit snake emperor, who was currently frolicking in the 100 Poison Valley on Fish Orchid Planet. The little blue snake was dumbfounded. When it raised its little snake head and saw its little master, it couldn't help but shiver. It shrunk its head like a human and quickly closed its mouth to hide its two fangs. Little Master couldn't be thinking about Snake Tooth again, could she? It took so long for it to grow back. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Mu expressionlessly said. What are you cowering for? Isn't it just taking 2 drops of your venom every 3 months? It doesn't hurt. The little blue snake blinked its dog eyes cutely and rolled around in her hand like a corpse. Then, its snake body stiffened with its belly facing the sky without any integrity. Duanyu couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this. He exchanged a glance with Emolian next to him. Were the beasts by Jojo's side also lacking in integrity? Emolian gave him an especially annoying look. Thankfully, his Sir Jojo didn't like little beasts that acted cute. Otherwise, these stinky things might have to compete with him for favor. Chapter 30:20. Emolian was about to pick up the little blue snake and toss it away. The little blue snake seemed to have sensed an unprecedented crisis and hastily coiled itself around Arbor's wrist. It obediently coiled itself into a circle and stopped moving like a corpse. Arbor was amused. He looked down at the little blue snake before looking up at Emolian and Duanyu. We swish. Thump, thump, thump. A series of urgent sounds came from the bottom of the ship. They soon saw the little fatty's nimble body dashing forward as he shouted. There are several hundred to 1,000 sword-toothed fish digging into the ship below. I think the bottom of the ship is going to be pierced through very soon. Everyone was grief-stricken when they heard this. It wasn't that they were afraid. If it were any other time, the worst that could happen was that the ship would sink, and they would just fly up into the air. But in this current situation, with such dense thunderclouds hovering above Du Chunjiang, they would dare to hack you to death if you dared to fly up into the air. Who dared to fly up recklessly? That would be asking for a beating. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump. The sounds of the ship's bottom being pierced gradually grew louder in the stormy night, causing everyone's nerves to tighten to a critical point in an instant. Holy Sun Mi-yin rushed onto the ship despite the torrential rain, and solemnly said to everyone, "Everyone, conserve your spiritual energy, and pay attention to your defenses. When we enter the water later, we will need a defensive barrier to support us. Who knows how long we will struggle in the water." On the side, Qi Xianxian rolled up her small sleeves. "Let's fight it out with them." How could a group of spiritual cultivators like them be afraid of several hundred sword-toothed fish? What a joke. Crack. The boatman shrieked in panic. "The bottom of the ship is leaking." Arbor turned to look at them with a frown. This ship employed more than a dozen normal boatmen. If they entered the water, they wouldn't have any chance of survival. The teeth of the sword-toothed fish could chew them into pieces at any moment. Holy Sun Mi-yin hastily said, "Hurry and gather around. Follow behind us. When we fall into the water later, try your best to find wooden planks for cover." Crack. Kacha-kacha. Some of the sword-toothed fish jumped up and jumped onto the deck of the boat. Everyone was about to kill them. Arbor suddenly said, "Wait." Akir had long found her an eyesore. Upon hearing this, she sternly shouted, "Wait, what? Don't you see that these sword-toothed fish are about to chew up our treasures? What are you waiting for? Kill him." Akir stepped forward with her sword and cut the sword-toothed fish in half without saying a word. At the same time, a stream of venom spurted out from the belly of the sword-tooth-long fish, flying straight towards her face. At the same time that Akir cried out in alarm, she felt her body being pulled back and involuntarily fell over. ACI quickly pulled her to the back, but a young girl from the Hong Fu Academy standing beside Akir was out of luck. A portion of the splattered venom landed on her face and hands. She screamed in pain, and subconsciously covered her face with her hands as she screamed. As if her face was burned by fire, it quickly turned red, swollen, and rotted. A piece of flesh from her chin fell to the ground with a plop, causing Akir to widen her eyes in horror. This venom was so terrifying. Arbor quickly stepped forward, pulled out a silver needle, and pricked the girl a few times. Then, he stuffed a pill into her mouth and said with a solemn expression, "Swallow it." The other students from the Hong Family Academy gasped in astonishment. Chapter 30:21. The girl reflexively swallowed the pill, and the rotting condition on her face improved slightly. It didn't continue to worsen. However, when everyone saw her face, they couldn't help but gasp. Her face was completely ruined. Not only was her originally delicate and pretty face extremely swollen, but there were also 2 holes in her chin and cheeks that exposed her ghastly white bones. Akir shrunk her neck in fright. She took a step back and hid behind Yas. However, several students from the Hong Academy couldn't resist reprimanding her angrily. "Why are you hiding behind him? If you hadn't recklessly swung your sword to chop the sword-toothed fish just now, how could this have happened? Brainless guy. Jinx. Jinx." Akir was also extremely aggrieved. How could she have known that the sword-toothed fish was so disgusting that there was actually a bag of poison hidden in its stomach? How could it give someone such a thing before it died? Did they think she was willing? It wasn't like she did it on purpose. The disfigured girl covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Arbor was a bit vexed and couldn't resist shouting, "All of you shut up." She threw a medicine bottle to the girl. "Apply it once in the morning and night. You'll recover after a month." Everyone looked at her in a daze. They saw that the little stoic still didn't have much of an expression, and her gaze was even colder as it swept over the sobbing girl. Her gaze was really cold. This was what everyone thought in their hearts. That girl dazedly clutched the medicine bottle in her hand and raised her head to glance at the little stoic. At first, she was frightened by the little stoic's cold gaze, and then she felt as if a warm current flowed into her heart. The girl inexplicably felt that although the stoic face in front of her was young, for some reason, it made people want to trust her unconditionally. Thank you. The girl pursed her lips, her voice as weak as a mosquito's bite. After this incident, Akir also quieted down. She shrunk her neck and hid behind ACI and Ollie without saying anything else. The boatman shivered as they lay on the ground and said to Holy Sun Miyen, "Sir Holy Sun, save us, save us." Not only were the sword-toothed fish's teeth formidable, but the venom in its stomach was even more frightening. They were just ordinary people. If they were bitten by the sword-toothed fish, they would definitely die. However, if the venom accidentally splashed onto them when they were slaughtering the saber-toothed long fish, then with their identities as ordinary people, they might not even be as good as the young girl, and would die in a matter of minutes. Holy Sun Miyan's expression was also rather grave. He turned to look at the little stoic and asked gravely, "Do you have any methods?" Inexplicably, he felt that this little girl, who was full of treasures, should have a way to help everyone out of this predicament. The little fellow raised her eyebrows and glared at him. "Didn't you bring this disaster upon yourselves? Now that you can't control yourself, you want to ask me for help?" Holy Sun Miyan said, "Is there a misunderstanding? Now we're all in the same boat. Was he crazy to attract these things to harm everyone, including himself?" "Humph." The little stoic rolled her eyes at him. "You don't know how to cause trouble, but don't tell me other people can't?" Holy Sun Miyan reflexively glanced at the silent holy nun Nie Yaoguang. For some reason, he had an intuition that the little stoic was targeting the holy nun. Chapter 3022. Holy Nun Nie Yaoguang, on the other hand, was looking down without any expression on her face. When she saw the Holy Sun's gaze, she bowed and said respectfully, "Holy Sun, let us go down and slaughter the sword-toothed fish." The moment she said that, the few priests of the temple looked at her, as if they had eaten a fly. What kind of joke was this? Since she knew that the sword-toothed fish had poison in their stomachs, she still wanted them to go down and die. There were not only hundreds and thousands of sword-toothed fish gathered below, there were probably close to 7 to 8 million of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, not to mention so many sword-toothed fish. The few priests stared at Holy Nun Nie Yaoguang, as if they were looking at a lunatic. Is there something wrong with your brain? Even with so many people going down together, they might not be able to handle so many sword-toothed fish, much less 30 to 40 of them from the temple? The holy nun's expression was calm. With a flip of her hand, she took out an exquisite ball with multicolored light flowing around it. "You all only need to assist me. Once I keep all these sword-toothed fish into this exquisite ball, there will naturally be no danger left." Whoa! The exquisite ball in the holy nun's hand is a storage spiritual artifact. Everyone's eyes lit up as they landed on her hand. That storage spiritual artifact looked like it was overflowing with light. From the outside, it looked very beautiful. On the other hand, Emo Lien merely glanced at her before curling his lips slightly and shifting his gaze away. The little fellow tugged at her husband's sleeve curiously. "Lien, is her exquisite ball very powerful?" "The material is not bad, but the forging standard is a little bad." Emo Lien whispered in her ear. "This exquisite ball is made from deep-sea cold iron, and there are more than 10 kinds of good materials in it. Previously, when we were forging weapons for Little Fatty and the rest, if we could have 3 or 4 of them, we could have forged their weapons into level 15 divine artifacts." "What a pity." Arbor blinked. "In that case, the material of this exquisite ball is good, but the forging is not satisfactory?" Emo Lien nodded and murmured something into her ear. Afterwards, he winked at her with an expression of watching a good show. A faint smile appeared on the little fellow's stoic face, and he nodded his head with a grin. Seeing that Nie Yaoguang was so confident, Holy Sun Miyin nodded and said, "Since that's the case, everyone in the Divine Palace will follow me down. Assist the Saintess in keeping these sword-tooth fish into the exquisite orb." Saintess Nie Yaoguang was a little excited, even though she didn't show it on her face. She thought to herself that if she could subdue these sword-toothed fish that had sharp teeth and could spit poison, she would naturally be able to kill a lot of enemies in the water in a matter of minutes. She subconsciously glanced at Arbor, then turned around and led the Holy Sun and the others to the bottom of the cabin. Duan Yu glanced at Emolien and thought, "The Saintess, this fool, is probably going to run out of luck." At this time, Madame Goen had already shakily crawled over with one leg. That robust man, Huang Yang, hurried to her side and quickly reached out to support her. He whispered, "Madam, I was held back by someone just now." Madame Goen quickly waved her hand at him, indicating for him to stop talking. She warily glanced at Emolien and Arbor, who were standing at the side of the ship, and shuddered all over. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., don't wait for me." Chapter 30-23. Right now, she was truly a bit fearful of this stoic face. She secretly made up her mind to avoid provoking this little stoic, if she could in the future. After suffering so many losses at her hands, Goengua had learned her lesson. She was the dignified madam of Goengua. If she could avoid provoking this couple, she would naturally be able to live a good life with a handsome man. However, she had a bit of a screw loose previously, and just had to target this stoic face. The stoic face wasn't an easy bone to chew, just based on her cold and stern appearance just now. Even the emperor couldn't be provoked. If she hadn't wailed loudly in the end, and knelt on the ground to beg for mercy, perhaps she really would have been killed by this stoic face. Madame of Goengua believed that in the end, the little stoic didn't stop killing her because she was soft-hearted. Why didn't she kill her? Because a coward like Madame of Goengua wasn't worth it for her to make a move. For some reason, Madame of Goengua had such a clear thought in her mind. She shuddered and supported the robust man, Huang Yang, by the arm. She whispered to him, "How is Mr. Zhao?" Huang Yang weakly shook his head at her. The shock in his heart hadn't passed yet. Prince Emo really didn't give Madame of Goengua any face, and killed Mr. Zhao with a single blow. The Crown Prince was warning Madame of Goengua that if she continued, her outcome wouldn't be any better than Mr. Zhao's. Mr. Zhao truly had 8 lifetimes worth of bad luck. Just because he wanted to protect Madame of Goengua, the couple viewed him as a thorn in their flesh. Although Huang Yang felt that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless in their methods, he had nothing to say in response. After all, the two sides had different standpoints, so their opponents were naturally different as well. If Madame seized this rare opportunity, it was hard to guarantee that she wouldn't be so ruthless towards the Crown Princess. Although the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless, they merely struck first to gain the upper hand. Winner takes all. Wasn't Madame admitting defeat now out of fear of being beaten? Huang Yang sighed, and helped the limping Madame of Goengua to sit down on the side. He warned, "Madam, I'll help you bandage your wound first. When it enters the water later, this blood might attract ferocious beasts in the water." Madame Goen nodded listlessly, and didn't say anything. She just let the gazelle do whatever it wanted. The little stoic reached out to stroke the strands of hair that floated in front of her forehead, and absent-mindedly turned her head to glance at the Madam of the Ministry of State Security. Like a startled little beast, Goen sat up straight and shrunk back to the railing. Arbor looked at her coldly, and then retracted his gaze. Madame Goen only felt a bone-chilling coldness. She touched her forehead, and found that it was full of cold sweat. She was so frightened by this glance that she almost peed. Everyone on the ship was anxious and restless. A few students from the academy could not help but lower their heads to look into the water. From their point of view, they could only see the 5-colored light of the exquisite ball faintly flickering. It seemed that the Saintess was currently absorbing the saber-toothed fish. It would be much better if I could take away all the sword-fang fish. Even if they entered the water, they would not have to face the siege of thousands of sword-fang fishes. The little stoic reached out to hold the railing and looked down. She then blinked and shrunk into her husband's arms. "They're here." Boom. A huge tremor stole up from the bottom of the ship. Everyone, who was brimming with anticipation, was instantly stupefied by this sound. They only felt the ship violently shake and tremble. The ship, which was riddled with holes, disintegrated in an instant. Chapter 30-24. Caught off guard. Everyone fell into the water like dumplings. Sir Jojo stretched out his leg and stepped on a small piece of floating wooden lattice window. He looked around and saw that Emolien was busy keeping the broken pieces of the exquisite ball. Countless sword-toothed fishes jumped up and down beside his feet. When they touched the wall of fire that rose from his feet, they hurriedly retreated. Xiaomu waved her hand, and a blank storage talisman emitting a purple light flew out from her inner world. It circled around her before abruptly stopping in front of her. The peerless purple talisman shone brightly. At the same time, countless sword-toothed fishes were sucked into the talisman and circled in the air. Waves of sword-toothed fishes were all sucked into the peerless purple talisman. The flustered boatmen had just thought that their lives were over when they saw such a shocking scene in front of them. For a moment, they did not know if they were overjoyed or overjoyed. They looked at Sir Jojo in a daze and could not say a word for a long time. After Arbor sucked the last sword-toothed fish into the purple talisman, she stretched out her hand and pinched the talisman in her hand. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Their gazes landed on the expressionless young lady and thought to themselves, "This young lady looks cold, but her heart is not cold." This action really saved the majority of people. At this moment, many people fell into the water because there were no wooden planks to step on. Luckily, all the sword-toothed fishes in the water were sucked away by Arbor. Hence, there was no more trouble. At the same time, Saintess Nia Yaoguang, whose hair was in a mess, rushed out from the bottom of the boat with a pale face. At this moment, she was dripping with water. It was unknown whether it was because of the cold or because she was trembling in fear. Her face was very pale, and her body could not stop trembling. Recalling her previous actions, Nia Yaoguang's face was pale. Behind her, Holy Sun Miyan and more than 30 god disciples also jumped out. Their faces were also very pale. When they were underwater, Saintess Nia Yaoguang had indeed kept most of the saber-toothed long fishes into the exquisite ball. Everyone was overjoyed and felt that the Saintess was very reliable. She had actually thought of such an idea. And the result? In the end, halfway through, the Saintess's expression changed greatly. The exquisite orb in her hand had actually exploded. It exploded. Holy Sun Miyan and the followers of the divine halls were caught unprepared. While setting up multiple defensive shields, they tried their best to escape and were almost besieged by the fishes. It was a close call. Before they even returned to the Red River Canyon, 5 or 6 of the god's disciples of the divine hall had already died. He did not die in the hands of a spirit beast or a divine beast. If this were to spread out, people would laugh their heads off. He was actually killed by the exquisite ball in the hands of the Saintess. With a sullen face, Holy Sun Miyan glares at the unreliable Saintess Nia Yaoguang. At this moment, Nia Yaoguang's face was also green and white. He still had lingering fears. She was about to open her mouth to defend herself when she saw the little girl with the stoic face use a storage talisman with a purple glow to keep all the saber-toothed long fishes. What are you doing?" Nia Yaoguang shouted angrily. Heavens! These little things that she had taken a fancy to were all taken away by that stoic-faced girl in one go? The Saintess simply wanted to beat her chest and stamp her feet. These were the things that she had taken a fancy to first. The Saintess's expression became more and more unsightly. One moment it was white and the next it was black. Chapter 30-25. Arbor swept her a glance and looked at Nia Yaoguang like she was looking at an idiot. Was this person an idiot? Didn't she see that she had harvested several batches of fish from Dukhan River? The holy nun was so angry that she wanted to pull out her hair. She blurted out hysterically, "This sword fang fish is what I want." Ever since she met the little stoic, the holy nun was actually gnashing her teeth in hatred. However, she had been restraining herself and didn't flare up. She also tried her best to maintain a calm attitude and turned a blind eye to the little stoic. But now she couldn't tolerate this. Why did this damn stoic face want to snatch everything? She even wanted to poke her nose into these sword fang fish that she had her eyes on. Arbor looked at the holy nun with pity. She just knew this person was an idiot. Otherwise, how could she ask such a stupid question? "Your family's fish?" Xiaomu gazed at her indifferently. The holy nun choked. This naturally couldn't be her fish. It was just that she had her eyes on it, Since it's ownerless, what are you yelling about? You want it. Just because you want it, it must be yours? If she wasn't an idiot, then what was she? The holy nun naturally wasn't in a good mood when the little girl looked at her like she was an idiot. She took a deep breath. Crown Princess, then what do you think if I buy 10 sword fang fish from you? She would most likely die from anger if she spoke to this stoic face. The holy nun felt that rather than continuing to pester this stoic face endlessly, she might as well strike a deal with her. She was determined to obtain this sword fang fish. She had to obtain it. Arbor gazed deeply at the holy nun and said meaningfully, "The holy nun is so impatient to obtain this sword fang fish because you want to nurture it into a mutated sword fang corpse fish, right?" The holy nun's face clearly stiffened, but it was only for a moment. Nie Yaoguang quickly returned to her senses and said faintly, "I don't know what the crown princess is talking about. You want this sword fang fish only because its teeth are hard, and it carries poison inside its body. If you can cultivate these little things and breed them in large batches, you will be in charge of everything in the water in the future." The saintess looked angry and could not help but say, "Crown Princess, I am talking to you about serious matters. Must you speak to me in such a tone? Not for sale." With a hook of her finger, Xiaomu took out a sword fang fish with a protruding belly that was thrashing about in her hand from her storage talisman. She gazed apathetically at the saintly nun before her. Doesn't saintly nun think that this chubby little thing is quite interesting? Interesting. Interesting your sister. The saintess was so angry that her stomach was about to explode. Her pair of black eyes stared fixedly at Arbor. Her eyes were filled with a dark light. Such interesting little fellows. I can't let you harm them. Whoosh! The saintess released a white light from her hand. The crescent-shaped blade made a circle in the air and slashed toward Arbor's neck. Holy Nun Miyin was shocked and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" Arbor looked at her expressionlessly with a trace of coldness in her eyes. She stretched out her hand and grabbed the curved blade in front of her with one hand. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. The little girl's hand was as hard as jade. She grabbed the curved blade that the saintess released and clasped it tightly in her hand. Let go. Nie Yaoguang was so angry that his face turned black. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. This is intolerable. Chapter 30:26. Under the command of her spiritual conscience, that scimitar moved at will and continuously twisted in Arbor's hand, trying its best to break free. However, how could Arbor give it this chance? She gazed icily at that saintess Nie Yaoguang, and the words she spat out were extremely icy and merciless. You are looking for death. Everyone who drew their swords against her wouldn't have a good ending. At this time, the little girl's toes were on a half-broken window frame, and she was floating on the river. Her plain-colored robes were gently fluttering in the river breeze. Her appearance was like an ice sculpture, cold and merciless. Madame Gohan shuddered slightly. She still remembered that she had previously courted death like this, throwing a spiritual weapon at the little girl in a futile attempt to kill her. But in the end, the unlucky one was herself. This saintess of the temple probably wouldn't have it easy either. Bang! The scimitar in the little stoic's hand didn't seem to be able to withstand that enormous force. Not only did it bend, but it also made a cracking sound in the little girl's hand. Crack! Ah! The saintess instantly felt an unbearable pain in her conscience. She reflexively fell backwards and missed a step, falling into the water with a splash. Holy Sun Miyin was taken aback. He quickly flew up and raised his hand to pull the saintess out of the water. Her complexion was pale, and her eyes were tightly shut, as if she was heavily injured. Holy Sun Miyin checked her breathing, and his gaze relaxed slightly. Fortunately, she was still breathing. At least she wasn't dead, so everything was still manageable. He turned to look at the little stoic and said sullenly, "Crown Princess, please don't lower yourself to the saintess's level if she has offended you." Arbor's expression froze, and she tossed away the scimitar that had turned into scrap metal. Hand it over. Holy Sun Miyin's heart involuntarily sank. He finally understood the little girl in front of him. Whoever came to provoke her, she would kill that person to settle the matter once and for all. It had to be said that this kind of mentality was extremely troublesome. Such a lousy temperament was definitely spoiled by someone. Although this saintess was courting death, since she was a member of the temple, Holy Sun Mi Yen felt that he had the responsibility to protect her safety. Naturally, he couldn't watch as the little girl slapped Saintess Nie Yaoguang to death. If she killed the saintess just like that, not only would he, Holy Sun Mi Yen, lose all face, but would the Sun Moon Temple still have any face left? Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath and felt that he needed to have a good talk with the little girl. Although he wasn't very confident in his heart, after all, he truly understood this little stoic's temperament thoroughly after interacting with her during this period of time. This little girl was definitely not someone who was easy to talk to. Just look at the previous madam of the National Security Agency. It had been a while, but she still wanted to get rid of her. The main thing was that she had many accomplices, so it was not good to provoke her. Thinking of this, Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened. He wished he could shake the saintess awake and slap her. You fucking caused so much trouble, yet you still want me to clean up your mess. You're simply too hateful. Holy Sun Mi Yen was currently scheming on how to plead with the little stoic to stop causing trouble for the saintess. However, he didn't know that the eyelids of the saintess he was supporting in front of him twitched slightly, and the finger resting on her side also flicked lightly. Stoic cough, Crown Princess. Holy Sun Mi Yen had just called out to her when he saw an attack talisman flying at him. Chapter 30:27. Holy Sun Mi Yen was startled and subconsciously retracted his finger. Then he remembered that the holy nun was unconscious. If he retracted his hand, the holy nun would fall backwards? Holy Sun Mi Yen didn't hear the sound of falling into the water. He looked down and was shocked. He saw that the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang, had already woken up. She was staring at Arbor with a pair of scarlet eyes. She suddenly pounced towards Arbor like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't stop her in time. Because the two of them were originally standing on a log, the holy nun suddenly jumped away, causing the log to lose its center of gravity and sink into the water. Holy Sun Mi Yen almost reflexively leaped into the air. At the same time, the lightning above his head seemed to have found the target of punishment and fiercely struck down on his head. Crack! A bright light flashed in the dark night. Holy Sun Mi Yen was caught off guard and was hit by the power of the lightning. He fell into the river with a splash. The sudden sound of thunder made many people jump up in fright. At the same time, several students of the Hong Academy also jumped up about 10 feet. This was great. The lightning was like an exploding pot, crackling as it gathered and attacked the person's body. Everyone was like grasshoppers, jumping back and forth on the floating objects on the river surface. Meanwhile, on the other side, the saintess had already jumped in front of Qiao Mu with a plop. She stared at her coldly with a pair of glowing red eyes as she crouched down on a piece of driftwood. She was like a crazed wild beast, as if she wanted to bite Qiao Mu's throat in half with a bite. Qiao Qiao. As Emolian flew over, he naturally became the target of the lightning bolt's concentrated bombardment. Arbor didn't panic at all. She just looked coldly at the holy nun Nie Yaoguang. Tisk. Her cold voice slightly raised, appearing particularly clear under the night sky. So it's a corpse puppet that is evolving. I really underestimated you before. She hit it really well. At this time, the holy nun's appearance had changed a bit. Not to mention her eyes had turned red. There were even short fangs protruding from the corner of her mouth. Tianyun's experiment began to make progress. Qiao Mu felt rather gloomy in her heart. This saintess usually looked like an ordinary person. No one would think that she was different from the rest. Moreover, she might even be able to control the corpse poison in her body. That was why she was able to release the corpse poison with such precision, causing her body to undergo a transformation. Boom! Nie Yaoguang seemed to have gone berserk. He punched down, and the river water turned into a piece of sky, sweeping towards Arbor. This unforeseen event happened too quickly. By the time Emolian, Duan Yu, and the others flew over one after another, Arbor's figure had already been washed away by that monstrous wave. Saintess Nie Yaoguang's eyes glowed with a crimson-red light. Roar! After a sharp howl, some of the lower-level spirit masters spat out blood, and their eardrums hurt. Holy Sun Mi Yen, who had just come out of the water, looked at Holy Nun Nie Yaoguang in shock. He didn't know what to think, but his expression was so shocked that he was almost speechless. Heavens! What kind of monster was that? Holy Sun Mi Yin suddenly recalled the little stoic's mocking words to him. Weren't these nightcaw birds summoned by your temple? Impossible. How was that possible? How could their temple of light, their sacred temple of light, be corrupted by this kind of dark and evil creature? Chapter 30:28. Holy Sun Mi Yin was extremely conflicted. He felt that the little stoic must be slandering him, but he also felt that with the little stoic's aloof and arrogant personality, she would disdain to lie. Holy Sun Mi Yin only felt his entire body turn ice cold, and he hastily kicked his legs and paddled forward. Meanwhile, Mo Lien Duanyu and the others swiftly moved on the river surface. Following closely behind were bolts of lightning that struck around everyone. Because of their leaping movements, the lightning enveloping the river surface collectively erupted, and the others also met with misfortune. The nether leopard that had just surfaced was instantly struck into the water by a bolt of lightning. The feeling of the electric current sizzling chaotically in his body, was especially satisfying. Qin Xian grabbed Qin Jiu's arm and scuttled out of the water. Before he could say anything, he was nearly struck by a bolt of lightning. He hastily tossed little Jiu out and also dodged to the side. That bolt of lightning just happened to land between the two of them, directly pulverizing a dilapidated piece of wood. Qin Jiu sprawled on the water surface and didn't dare to move, but his entire body involuntarily shuddered. Fuck! This bolt of lightning was truly ferocious. Where's second brother? Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist asking. Qin Jiu sprawled there and repeatedly shook his head. No, I don't see second brother. Damn it, eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist gritting his teeth and turned to glare at the saintess gravely. Qin Jiu didn't dare to move at all and repeatedly asked, Big brother, what's up with that woman just now? The eldest young Sir shook his head and turned to look at the people beside him. We have to leave this place as soon as possible. This bolt of lightning only floats on the water surface. I think it's more appropriate for us to hold our breath and swim for a while. The two young sirs from the Dou family hastily said. It's all that damn stoic face's fault. Zhongli Jiwei was almost struck by a bolt of lightning, and she angrily punched the water surface. If she hadn't angered the saintess, why would the saintess transform into a monster and cause everyone to be in a mess? Enough! What's the use of complaining over there? Chen Baojia shrieked in exasperation. Hurry and swim forward. A scene appeared on the Duchun River. All the people who had fallen into the river sank into the water under the intertwining lightning. They paddled with all their might, trying their best to escape. On the other hand, Mo Lien, Duanyu, and Duanmu Qing's group had shouldered 70 to 80% of the lightning bolts. It couldn't be helped. This group of people committed crimes against the wind and openly leaped in midair, completely ignoring Du Chuanjiang's clear order that prohibited flying. It caused waves of thunder and lightning to bombard them with extreme indignation. They quickly chased after him, and Jojo subconsciously started to swim in the water after being hit by a huge wave. As soon as the little fellow entered the water, he felt like a fish in water. In the past, she didn't understand what was going on, but now she had some understanding. This probably had something to do with his bloodline. Therefore, when she was in the water, it was as if she was walking on flat ground. She could even breathe freely without any discomfort. Unexpectedly, a few rotten corpse crocodiles came out from the side and bit at her hands and feet. Arbor looked back and saw Nie Yaoguang popping out from behind her like a ghost. His pair of red eyes emitted an eerie, cold glint in the water, and his viciousness was threatening. Yet Xiao Mu merely pursed her small lips indifferently. With a light stomp of her foot, she shot out like an arrow. Those zombie crocodiles opened their mouths and bit down on empty air. The saintly nun's face was filled with disbelief. Chapter 30:29. Arbor was actually able to escape from the mouths of several corpse crocodiles? She was actually able to move so quickly in the water. Wasn't that strange? Saintess Nie Yaoguang's eyes flashed with a hint of disbelief as she quickly paddled forward. At the same time, She commanded even more corpse crocodiles to chase after Arbor. After Arbor entered the water, the more she swam, the more she found the feeling. Her small arms moved in the water as if she was walking. She stepped on the water and floated further and further away. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "This saintess is definitely a person with a twisted mind." Her exquisite orb was not broken by Lord Jojo. So was there a need to chase after her to kill her out of humiliation? Previously, her lotus had said that the exquisite ball was made of the best materials, but the method used to make it was inferior and couldn't hold too many things. It was absolutely impossible for the saintess to try and take in so many ferocious sword-toothed fish. The exquisite ball's self-destruction was inevitable, so her lotus was prepared to pick up the scraps of materials. From the very beginning, the saintess was confused by the explosion of the exquisite ball and couldn't find a way to vent her anger. She actually looked for Master Jojo to vent her anger for no reason. She was simply crazy. Arbor kicked her legs and slid far away. She kept paddling forward. In the vast Du Chunjiang, to be honest, she also didn't know where she was going. Logically speaking, she should be heading towards the Red River Canyon. However, Master Jojo said that it was dark and there was water everywhere. He really couldn't tell where she was. At this time, the saintess who had chased after Arbor for a long time, but still couldn't catch up to her. The blood-red light in her eyes slowly receded, and she seemed to have returned to her normal state. She punched the water and kicked the water. With a splash, she rushed to the surface of the water. She coughed twice and spat out the cold river water in her mouth. A pair of pitch-black pupils flashed with a cold light as she stared at Arbor's departing figure. There was definitely something strange about this woman. Otherwise, how could she enter the water so quickly? Even when she activated her special bloodline, she still couldn't deal with her. Nie Yaoguang hammered the river water twice with great force. His face was filled with anger as he let out an angry roar towards the sky. After swimming for a while, Sir Jojo looked back and saw that Nie Yaoguang had stopped chasing after him. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. The corpse crocodiles were still chasing after her relentlessly. Sir Jojo was a little annoyed, so he simply turned around and ran back. He released a few icicles from his palms and stabbed them into the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles. When the other corpse crocodiles saw that the situation was not right, they actually wanted to scatter and escape in all directions, in a very human-like manner. How could Arbor allow them to escape? He immediately erected walls of water in all directions and ran through them without any hindrance. Dozens of icicles were cast down, and the remaining corpse crocodiles were dealt with as well. After the corpses were burned to ashes, Arbor collected the crystal cores in the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles and looked around blankly. So annoying. There was water everywhere. Was she going to soak in the water for the whole night? Forget it. She should return to Paradise Planet first and let Sapling contact Mo Lien and the others. With a thought, Arbor was about to enter Paradise Planet when she suddenly realized that she had lost contact with Chiu Chiu. The little fellow's face immediately became gloomy, and it was so gloomy that it swam back and forth in the water. Could it be that this Du Chunjiang not only forbade flying, but also forbade spirit? Chapter 30:30. Arbor tried 2 more times, but still couldn't get in. She couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Forget it, it's not hard to stay in the water anyway, so I'll just keep going. She wandered aimlessly for an entire night. Gradually, the horizon became a bit brighter. After soaking for an entire night, although she didn't feel uncomfortable, she still felt that she had to go ashore as soon as possible. This Du Chunjiang is really a damned place. Sir Jojo didn't like it very much. When a bit of red light faintly appeared in the distant horizon, the sky finally brightened. Arbor looked around blankly. She saw that the water was still, as if even the lightning above her head had disappeared. But she was surrounded by the river, and she was a little girl who didn't know where to go, so she could only continue forward with a confused expression. She swayed in the water and walked for about an hour before she finally saw a fishing boat on the river. The old man rowing the boat looked to be in his early 60s, and he slowly came over with a bamboo pole. There was also a young girl sitting at the bow of the boat. She looked to be about 18 or 19 years old, and her hair was combed into a big shiny braid. She was singing a folk song at the top of her lungs. Arbor's pitch-black eyes narrowed. She then raised her small hand above her head and waved at the old man. "Grandpa, there's someone over there." The young girl sitting at the bow of the boat suddenly cried out, unable to hide the surprise in her eyes. The boatman hurriedly rowed the boat over and handed the bamboo pole to Arbor. Arbor stretched out her foot and lightly tapped the pole. With a flip of her body, she easily landed on the boat. At the same time, the blue spiritual cleansing fire slightly evaporated her body, and her clothes instantly became dry. The young girl couldn't help but clap her hands and cheer. "Miss, you're really skilled." Arbor nodded slightly at her and cupped her hands at the boatman. "Old man, many thanks." The old boatman was a loyal and honest person. When he heard this, he hurriedly blushed and waved his hands. "Miss, where are you going? Why did you fall into the water at Du Chunjiang?" "Yesterday, there was thunder on Du Chunjiang all night. Could it be related to this girl? I'm going to the Red River Canyon." "Ah, that's perfect. Our Little Lee village is the only way to go to the Red River Canyon. Why don't you follow us back to the village before heading to the canyon?" "But miss, it's very dangerous for you to go to the canyon alone." That big braided girl was very talkative as she chattered. "But looking at the girl's skills, I reckon it won't be difficult for you to cross the canyon." "Miss, are you going to the shrine?" "The shrine is in the depths of the Red River Canyon." The old man smiled helplessly and nodded apologetically at Arbor. He then scolded his granddaughter. "Nyonyo, you asked so many questions at once that I don't know how to answer." The big braided girl called Nyonyo naughtily stuck out her tongue and said, "Miss, you don't look very old." "I'm 19, what about you?" 16. Then I'll call you little sister." Nyonyo giggled as if they were close friends. "All right." Arbor nodded. He didn't care too much about the title. She had some doubts in her heart and couldn't help but ask, "Old man, is this not the center of the river?" She remembered that their boat was destroyed halfway. It was reasonable to say that she drifted for an entire night and didn't know the direction, so she shouldn't be able to travel too far. But this pair of grandfather and granddaughter were only ordinary people, so they shouldn't be able to travel too far. Chapter 30-31. The elderly man was taken aback, but then he said amiably, "We fish for a living, so we usually only move around the river banks. We naturally don't dare to go to the center of the river. There are layers of lightning there day and night, so normal people don't dare to rashly take risks." Arbor couldn't help but be dazed. She asked softly, "Then, how far is this place from your Little Lee village?" Nyonyo laughed heartily. "Just an hour by water. We'll arrive very quickly." "Then how far is this place from the center of the river?" "Those treasured ships used by immortals take more than half a day to sail. Small boats like ours might not even arrive in 2 days." Nyonyo continued, "It's very far, at least 500 kilometers. Arbor couldn't help but be dumbstruck, unable to react for a long time. In that case, she had foolishly drifted more than 500 kilometers in the water in a single night? She didn't feel anything at all. She looked back blankly, thinking that it was no wonder she hadn't seen Emolien and Duan Yu's figures until now. She must have drifted too fast, so they simply couldn't catch up to her. But she really didn't feel anything at all. She didn't realize at all that she had traveled so far. Arbor instantly blushed with shame. She looked back at the boundless water and asked, "Sister Nyonyo, from Du Chun River to Red River Canyon, will we definitely pass by your village?" "Definitely." Nyonyo nodded vigorously. "Then we must pass by. Immortals can't fly in this area." Arbor nodded. "Why?" Us older generations all say that there are immortals protecting the surrounding citizens in the river. The living people and sacrifices thrown into the river during Spring City's sacrificial ceremony have only raised a large water snake for many years. Arbor shook her head speechlessly, thinking that they definitely didn't know the reason, so she recounted everything she saw and heard on the way to Nyonyo. Nyonyo clicked her tongue repeatedly as she listened. She treated it as a fantasy story and listened with great interest. "Little sister, your group is truly too amazing." The elderly man also kept sighing. "So it's just feeding a ferocious beast. Those sacrifices that Spring City had consecrated for so many years were actually thrown to a beast. It truly left one speechless. Sister, Shally Village is just up ahead. Arbor nodded in thought. Nyo said that Little Lee Village is the only way to Red River Canyon, so I'll wait at ease and wait for Emolien and the others to arrive. The old man pushed the bamboo pole to the shore. After the three of them went ashore, Arbor saw that although the village was small, it was very lively with people coming and going. Nyo and Grandpa are back. A fat woman greeted them with a smile, and her curious eyes wandered around Arbor. Sister Kufu, who is this little girl? Mrs. Fu looked at Arbor curiously and couldn't help but ask. The main reason was that this little girl's appearance was too exquisite. In the surrounding villages, they had never seen such a delicate little girl. No matter who it was, they couldn't help but want to take a few more glances at her. Nyo smiled and pulled Arbor to her side. Relative Sister Fu, we're in a hurry to go home. Make way, hee. Bah. The fat woman looked at the direction the three of them left and spat, her eyes darting around. This little girl is really good looking. I wonder where she's from. If she doesn't have any background. The fat woman looked up and almost fell over in fright. She saw a purple figure quietly appear in front of her. Chapter 30-32. The fat woman's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The Langjun in front of her had long eyebrows, and a hint of emerald green was faintly discernible in his black pupils. His robes fluttered in the wind, and he was elegant and graceful. The light in his hand disappeared, and the woman stared blankly as he stored a boat that could accommodate more than 30 people into a talisman. She couldn't help but be shocked, and she took a few steps back. When she finally reacted, the woman hurriedly prostrated herself on the ground and repeatedly kowtowed. Immortal, please spare my life. Immortal, please spare my life. The purple-clothed man looked at her indifferently. The light in his hand expanded, and a faint shadow of a small person wearing a crimson bridal dress and a phoenix coronet slowly paced on his palm. Although the light was extremely faint, the facial features were very detailed, allowing people to see it very clearly. The woman couldn't help but tremble. Her mind seemed to explode, and she couldn't help but tremble all over. Wasn't this the little girl with the delicate and cold face that she saw just now? Looking at the appearance of this immortal-like man, could it be that the little girl ran away from the marriage, and he chased after her? He was chasing after his wife. Just now, she had the idea to introduce this little girl to the village head's foolish son and earn a generous commission. Her mother. It turned out that this little girl's background was so great. Her husband was an immortal-like figure. Damn it. Fortunately, she didn't make a move. Otherwise, her entire family might not be able to keep their lives. The woman broke out in a cold sweat in shock and fear. In her daze, she heard the man's cold voice. Have you seen it? The woman nodded repeatedly like a chick pecking at rice. She replied repeatedly. I just walked over. I went to old Mr. Wang's house at the east end of the village. It's his house. There's a big plum tree at the door. The man glanced at her indifferently and reached out to take back the strolling little person. A cold breath brushed past the woman's face, and in an instant he was far away. The woman fell on her butt and sat on the ground. She repeatedly wiped the cold sweat on her head, and then subconsciously touched her neck. Fortunately, she didn't continue to court death. Why did she feel that her neck was sticky? The fat woman wanted to look down, but her head suddenly fell from her neck. She didn't see anything as her body fell straight to the side of the river. Perhaps even in death, he still couldn't figure out how he had been killed. Nyo and the old man slaughtered 2 fish, steaming one and braising the other. Only then did they finish their work. The 3 of them sat around the small square table. The door to the courtyard was kicked open. Arbor frowned. He got up and walked out of the house. He saw the man standing at the door. A pair of cold eyes stared straight at him. Her heart couldn't help but shrink slightly, and her entire body stiffened for a moment. She opened her mouth and said, "Why are you here?" A bolt of lightning was suddenly released from his hand, heading straight for the grandfather and grandson pair. "What are you doing?" Arbor hurriedly stepped in front of them, using the water spirit to block his spirit lightning, and took 2 steps back. A pair of big clear eyes instantly turned red with anger. The man raised the corner of his lips and sneered. You've never been a sympathetic person. When did you become so soft-hearted? Arbor looked at him coldly. You speak as if you know me very well. We're not close. Not close. He sneered. Probably not in this life. Arbor's eyes suddenly widened, staring straight at him. Chapter 30-33. At that moment, the little girl had the urge to run away. It was as if she had been seen through from top to bottom, from inside to outside, and she was caught off guard. She tried to secretly bring the old man and Nuno back to Paradise Planet, but to no avail. Seeing Omega Kotoka's cold gaze fall on the two people, as if he was going to attack someone else, Arbor made a prompt decision and put the two people into a storage talisman. She didn't have time to explain anything to them. At the same time, Omega Kotoku had already rushed forward and grabbed Arbor's wrist. In the next second, he snatched the storage talisman that she didn't have time to put away. Tisk, the second young master sneered and shook his head. I didn't expect that my Jojo would be so kind one day. Why? You have no enmity with them, so why do you have to be so aggressive? Arbor looked coldly at the storage talisman floating up and down in the man's hand, and her heart was in a mess for a moment. What was this person trying to do? Let's find a place to talk. There's nothing to talk about between us. Xiaomu warily took a step back and tried to pull her wrist back from his grasp with all her might. However, his movements were very big, and he dragged Sir Jojo to his side. Xiaomu used a Herculean effort to prevent herself from rolling into his embrace. Her almond-shaped eyes were glaring angrily, and they contained deep indignation. What are you doing? Talking about why you've been so wary of me since we first met. We didn't know each other at that time. Why do you always want to keep a respectful distance from me? Why? His fingers seemed to brush her sideburns, and he said lightly, why do you want to run away? Arbor saw that his eyes were deep, and a jade light flashed in his eyes. Although he was very good-looking, he inexplicably made people feel terrified. Her wrist stiffened slightly, and then she tried even harder to pull it out of his hand. Let go of me. The lives of ordinary people are as insignificant as ants, aren't they? A few wisps of purplish-blue light suddenly appeared between his fingers that held the talisman. Take a guess. If I destroy this talisman, will the person inside still be able to keep his life? Xiaomu snorted and looked at him silently, not saying a word. You must be thinking that with the quality of the purple talisman, it's impossible for me to destroy it. Gongzi Omega Kotoka suddenly smiled. His eyes seemed to be shining. He looked very gentle, but it made people feel cold. That's you. The second young master finally loosened his grip and let go of her wrist. He lowered his head to look at the bruise on her white wrist caused by his fingers and frowned in dissatisfaction. Just because you can't destroy it doesn't mean that I can't. Now, do you still want to run away? He flicked the talisman in his hand and looked at her indifferently. Ha! Xiaomu coldly swept him a glance, and her figure slightly retreated 2 steps. Up to you. Gongzi Omega Kotoka's eyes moved slightly. He looked at the delicate girl in front of him and smiled. Jojo, is it really okay for you to be so cruel? Arbor looked at him coldly. After a while, she looked up and looked around. Since they're here, why don't you let them show themselves? Gongzi Omega Kotoku curled his lips, and a faint smile flashed in his eyes. Chapter 30-34. You're useless. You've already been discovered by the little girl. Why don't you come out? Second young master said indifferently. 5 people came down from the eaves, laughing heartily. Only one of them, a handsome young master who was waving a fan, had a slender figure, while the other 4 had rather strange appearances. Little girl, you've got guts. A short and fat man chuckled. Arbor glared at young master Omega Kotoka angrily. Did this bastard need to find so many people to catch her? She was a mere level 11 spiritual master. Did he need to find 5 godly realm experts to catch her? He was crazy. Jojo, you better be obedient. Don't think about running away. Young Master Omega Kotoka smiled faintly. You can't run away. Go ahead and kill her. Arbor said coldly. Ayaya, little girl. It's not good to be so cruel. A gorgeously dressed woman with fiery red lips said softly as she twirled 3 orchid fingers. Xiaomu chuckled. I can't even protect my own life. So why should I go to the trouble of worrying about other people? No one wants your life. Young Master Omega Kotoka's eyes darkened. Little girl, as long as you obediently leave with us, I can guarantee that second young master will definitely not touch these people. As that delicate and beautiful woman spoke, she threw a large coquettish glance at Lady Qiao Qiao. Lord Jojo felt his hair stand on end. Young Master Omega Kotoka glanced at her coldly. Do you think your eyes are unnecessary? That woman pouted and stomped her feet coquettishly. Annoying, you're so fierce. That little girl is pretty. It's normal for me to take a few more glances. This time, even the Taoist friends beside her couldn't help but shudder. It was obvious how mushy this person's expression was when he spoke. Are you threatening me? Arbor looked at her coldly. How can this be a threat? The woman said in a delicate voice. In this little village, there are at least 200 people. What does that have to do with me? Arbor said coldly. When dealing with people, one should act according to one's ability. If it's just a small matter, I'll help if I can. If I have to sacrifice myself to help them, then forget it. I'm not the savior of the world. It's better to rely on the heavens than me. When the woman heard this, she was slightly stunned. She blinked her eyes, and an expression of disbelief appeared on her face. Wow. Little girl, you're too interesting. Sister really likes you. Shameless bastard, don't talk to me. Second young master wanted to laugh. He curled his lips and said, Looks like you won't get what you want, Jojo. There's no use stalling for time. Sir Omega Kotoka looked at her aloofly. Mo Lien and Duan, you really can't make it over in a short amount of time. Arbor rolled his eyes. The 6 of you against 1 is an unfair advantage. Despicable scoundrel, you want me to leave with you? Dream on. Sir Omega Kotoku raised a brow. That woman couldn't resist chuckling. Oh, beautiful little girl. Then what do you want to do? How about we make a bet? She couldn't even open Paradise Planet right now, so she couldn't summon any helpers. She could only use her wits, and not brute force against these people. If she took a gamble, she might still have a chance to escape. Second young master stared straight at her like this. When he saw her large, lively eyes darting back and forth, he felt as if his heart was lightly scratched by a soft feather. It was very itchy. He clearly knew that she was stalling for time and waiting for help, but he actually didn't really want to go against her. Chapter 30-35. Hehe, little miss wants to fight one-on-one. The woman twisted her waist and winked at her. Alright, then I'll play with you. Arbor glanced at him. We agreed to fight one-on-one. If you don't keep your word and gang up on me, what do you think? Everyone's mouth twitched. That short and fat wintermelon laughed heartily. Little miss, don't worry. We keep our word. Since we agreed to fight one-on-one, we naturally won't lie to you. Hearing that, Arbor nodded. Alright then, come over a little. The little fellow hooked her little finger at that coquettish woman. Let's find a slightly more spacious place to fight. You can't run away. Young Master Omega Kotoka said indifferently. Who said I'm going to run? Arbor snorted coldly. Do I look like the kind of person who would run away before the fight even starts? That coquettish woman burst into laughter and nodded repeatedly. Alright. Little miss, we'll fight however you want. So what if I win? That coquettish woman giggled. Arbor felt that the thick layer of powder on her face was about to fall off. If you really beat me, then I'll help you escape. Ling! Young Master Omega Kotoka's face darkened as he looked at her warningly. That coquettish woman called Ling pursed her lips and rolled her long eyelashes. We're a group of adults. We can't just bully a little girl who's just reached marriageable age. The short and fat wintermelon waved the purple gold hammer in his hand and laughed heartily. Ling, don't go easy on me. Tisk fatty, look at what you're saying. What do you mean by going easy on me? Alright, enough with the nonsense. You come here. Arbor impatiently interrupted him and hooked her finger at that coquettish woman again. Alright then, I'm coming, little miss. That woman's face was all smiles. Her slender waist twisted slightly, and she floated in front of Arbor. Arbor didn't say a word, and took the lead to send a bunch of attack talismans flying over. Although the woman was smiling, She was already prepared. She raised her hand and made a circle, and a white light flowed past her eyes like water. Taking a closer look, he found that it was a soft sword that was glistening with water. A stream of condensed water spirit power covered the body of the sword, suddenly stirring up streams of water light, blocking most of the attacking talismans. The remaining ones exploded beside the woman, but they were instantly blocked by the divine armor that floated up from her body. A full set of godly armor. The short and fat winter melon's pupil shrank slightly, and the dark light loomed in his eyes. Ling, this fellow, had only followed young master for less than half a month, and had never revealed his strength in front of others. Normally, they would often hear the young master praising this person to be very outstanding, but they had never seen her fight with anyone. On the contrary, they were used to being disgusted by her every day. Unexpectedly, after seeing him today, he was indeed extraordinary. Oh my God, this guy's godly armor looks like it has already risen to the mystic grade. A small old man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks couldn't help but exclaim. He asked the short and fat winter melon, "Fatty, how old do you think this guy is?" "He should be around my age." The short and fat winter melon carried his purple gold hammer and said. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Then they looked at the woman in front of them, who was holding 3 orchid fingers, and couldn't help but shudder in disgust. Holy shit! As old as Fatty. Then he has to be around 200 years old. Dressing up like a little girl all day long. This guy must be mentally abnormal. Chapter 30-36. That woman grabbed Arbor's arm. Wait! Arbor suddenly stopped her. The woman's expression faltered slightly, and she really did stop her attack. This isn't fair at all. Arbor said expressionlessly. I won't accept it even if I lose. The woman called Ling side. Little girl, then how do you want it to be fair? The short and fat winter melon, and the others shuddered, feeling unaccustomed to that woman's soft voice. Arbor's heart also shuddered for no reason. He said with a stoic face, You're clearly at the transcendent God realm, but you lowered your realm and lied to me that you're at the transcendent God realm. The woman raised her eyebrows with a grin. Then tell me, how should we fight? The short and fat winter melon, and the others were practically stunned. They were absolutely cursing in their minds. This old hag actually didn't object. The little girl had clearly guessed correctly. She was actually at the transcendent God realm? An old monster at the transcendent God realm. Ling! The second young master felt that she had gone a bit overboard. She should subdue the little girl as soon as possible instead of standing here and indulging this willful and reckless little girl. Ling blinked. It's fine, Shinshin, don't worry. The little girl can't run away. Shinshin. Everyone shuddered in disgust again. The little stoic turned her head away in disdain. How about this, you punch me once, and I'll punch you once. We'll use 3 punches as the standard. Whoever leaves this circle first loses. Ift. Everyone couldn't resist sputtering with laughter. Seeing the little girl's glare, they involuntarily coughed and hastily held back their laughter. The little girl actually wanted to compete with Ling purely in strength? Wasn't this a joke? A little spiritual cultivator like you is the biggest joke in the world. Competing in strength with the transcendent God realm. How much are you courting death? Courting death, little girl, I can't hurt you. Shinshin will kill me. Speak properly. Shin Xang couldn't bear it anymore and glared at her. So fierce. Ling pursed her lips and smiled sweetly at Arbor. Jojo, can't you be obedient? Stop talking nonsense. Can you beat me? The little fellow looked like she was jumping up and down, eager to give it a try. Alright. I'll use 10% of my strength to fight you. Arbor chuckled, drew a big circle on the ground and jumped in first. You first. Ling felt like laughing. He nodded and threw a punch. It was as if a gentle breeze had brushed past the little girl's face. The little girl had cast a double talisman on herself, and her small body did not move at all. When it was Jojo's turn, the little guy naturally activated a few speed and strength talismans, and threw them all at Ling. Feather didn't pay attention at first, but he was pushed near the white line by the little girl twice in a row. What kind of messy talisman is this little girl opening? It seems rather strange. Are you still not going to use your strength? Jojo said coldly. If you don't use your strength, you're going to lose. As she spoke, she proudly placed another gravity talisman on herself and blinked. You can't push me away. Qin Xian's heart stirred, and her gaze fell on this little girl without blinking. Ling's eyes flashed and he chuckled. How naughty. Thus, he used 50% of his strength and swung it at the little girl's body. Qin Xian felt her heart shrink, as if something bad was going to happen. She was about to stop it. She saw that the power fell on the little girl. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her figure flew out in an instant like a kite with a broken string. Halfway through, she nimbly flipped and escaped. Chapter 30-37. Little stoic face was so cunning. This thought flitted across everyone's minds. She had deliberately put all kinds of talismans on herself, at the beginning, to give people the illusion that they could not do anything to her if they did not have some skills. In reality, the stoic student had been thinking about running away from the beginning. What nonsense was she spouting about? How could this lady surrender without a fight? In a situation where there was a great disparity in strength, in front of 6 deity realm experts and above, she could just laugh at them. Who would want to fight with them? At the cost of a small injury, Sir Jojo borrowed Feather's turbulent power to fly far away. If she did not run now, when would she run? Everyone only saw the small figure turn slightly and run away like a wisp of smoke, leaving as fast as lightning. Feather widened her eyes in shock and blinked. She could not help but exclaim, Heavens! The little girl is too shameless. How could she deceive me like this? Before Feather could finish her rambling, Sir Omega Kotoka glared fiercely at her. The second young master waved his sleeves and chased after her in the direction of Arbor, using his divine sense to lock onto her figure first. Everyone hurriedly chased after him, following the little guy's figure as he flew off. As Sir Jojo ran, she ate pills along the way and slapped all kinds of speed-increasing talismans on herself, as if they were free. 1, 2, 3. Her speed increased bit by bit. She felt the strong wind blowing against her face, causing half of her face to hurt. Sir Jojo was so miserable. She did not cultivate normally, but she was really unlucky at the crucial moment. No, Lady Xiao Xiao could be considered to be diligent and hardworking normally, but this second Qin was a pervert to begin with, and he even brought along a bunch of old freaks. Sir Jojo instantly felt that she was so miserable that she was about to explode. This was not her fault at all. It was definitely because of bad luck. When one's luck was bad, it was useless to say anything. The little fellow's mind was filled with these ridiculous thoughts, but the speed at which he was running did not change. He ran all the way into the distance, constantly trying to see if he could sneak into Paradise Planet to hide. After a few failed attempts, Sir Jojo could not help but feel helpless. Qin Xian's cold voice sounded in his ears. You can't escape. Why aren't you stopping? Bah! I'd be a fool if I stopped. Lord Xiqiao turned around to take a look, and her heart couldn't help but tremble. Damn! Omega Kotoka was getting closer and closer to her. Was this still too much? Arbor did not dare to be distracted. She ran all the way forward. Seeing that the terrain in front of her was getting higher and higher, she rushed forward without a care. It wasn't until he reached the edge of a cliff that his footsteps suddenly stopped. Even so, there were still several small pieces of gravel falling down from his feet. When he looked down, the fault was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He couldn't see the end of it. Jojo, where do you think you're going? Qin Xian's figure flashed and stood 5 steps away from her, looking at her indifferently. Run, I'm running to death. This place is really not good. Why is it still in the no-fly zone? The short and fat winter melon caught up with her, panting. Miss Xiao, you should stop. You can't run away. What a joke. Second young master had already locked her divine sense. Where else could she run to? Lady Jojo turned her head and coldly glanced at Qin Xian, a trace of a sneer appearing at the corner of her mouth. Chapter 30-38. At this moment, Qin Xian's heart skipped a beat, as if it was being ruthlessly torn apart by a ruthless palm. She felt extremely uneasy. Wait a minute, Qin Xian blurted out. The little fellow jumped down the fault without any explanation. Her swift and resolute manner of wanting to get rid of him instantly pierced the second young master's broken heart. She would rather die than stay by his side. It was as if that tattered little figure appeared in front of his eyes, wriggling with all her might. Even if she could not walk, she still wanted to escape far away. It was clearly not like this before. Why did the two of them end up in such a laughable state, by a freak combination of factors? The Omega Katoka's eyes instantly turned malicious. The dark green luster in the depths of his eyes rose and fell, dark and treacherous. Ling ran over as well. Seeing this, he could not help but cover his mouth and exclaim, "Ah, the little girl's temper is so fierce." The second young master ignored him, and jumped down the fault as well. Ling and the others were also stunned. They did not expect the second young master to jump down with the little girl. They hesitated for only a second before jumping down as well. The fault was very high from the ground below. When they jumped down, it was as if they had fallen into a bottomless pit. They were mercilessly pulled down by a suction force. "We've been tricked." The Omega Katoka was pulled down halfway by the suction force. He immediately reacted. Frowning slightly, he tried his best to break free from the suction force below the fault and float up. It was a pity that the area around Du Chunjiang was restricted from flying. As soon as he had a thought, he floated up into the air, and saw a layer of thunderclouds floating in the sky. Then, without any explanation, it struck towards his head. It really was very effective. At the same time, Arbor, who had used a black-level invisibility purple talisman to hang at the bottom of the cliff, slowly revealed herself. She released a wisp of wood essence from her fingers, which grew into a vine, and flung it towards the top of the cliff. She took the opportunity to climb up, and stood on the edge of the cliff. She looked down coldly. Just now it was actually just a smokescreen. Why would she disregard her own life, and foolishly jump down when she could not float? Under normal circumstances, Omega Katoka would never fall for this trick. After all, he still had her divine sense locked, so how could he fall for her petty tricks? It was obvious that his mind was in chaos, and he had lost his usual calm judgment. But why was it like this? Who would follow their pet to the grave when it died? This is not normal. Lady Qiao Qiao frowned slightly. Then, she turned and ran toward Du Chunjiang. As long as she jumped into the water, with her inhuman speed in the water, even if the Omega Katoku had a spiritual weapon, it would be impossible for him to catch up with her. Xiaomu calculated in her mind before running in Du Chunjiang's direction. Calculating the time, Mo Lian and the others should be arriving soon. At this moment, thunder continued to rumble in the Du Chun River. An afterimage of a ghost face appeared between the lightning layers. Like a tornado, it swooped down from above. It landed on the surface of the water with a loud boom, enveloping the area within a radius of several miles. This layer of golden light was so dazzling that Prince Mo and the others could not help narrowing their eyes. After Jojo was swept away by the current, Mo Lian, Duan Yu, and Mu Xingchen took the lead in chasing after him. They chased after Jojo's aura, but a wave of zombie crocodiles appeared midway and blindly bit at them. After dealing with this wave, they were soon trapped by the golden light formation. Chapter 30-39. Upon closer inspection, this golden light was originally a confinement formation made up of 128 jade talismans. After the talisman array suddenly enveloped them, the light of thunder and lightning began to sizzle within its range. Boom! Coupled with the lightning bolts that came crashing down from the thunderstorm outside, the lightning bolts inside this confinement formation sizzled chaotically and hacked at the three of them. Emolienne swept away a wave of lightning with a wave of her sleeve, and her expression darkened. This small confinement formation's layout was very exquisite. Normally, there would always be a time when the talisman energy inside the formation was depleted, and the lightning would naturally disappear. But it was different now. The thunderclouds above Du Chunjiang outside were gathering, as if they were endlessly replenishing this confinement formation. This would be a bit troublesome. The three of them looked at each other bewildered. Emolienne said coldly, "Come, gather your power and hack at one point." Duan Yu and Mu Xingchen nodded in unison. At this time, our dear Duan Yu didn't bother to bicker with Prince Mo anymore. He flashed forward and raised his hand to release a wisp of sacred energy. Following Emolien's wisp of energy, he swept it towards a floating jade talisman above the confinement formation. Bam! A corner of that jade talisman shattered, and the entire jade talisman formation started floating and shaking. It rearranged itself and circled around again with a whoosh before completing its arrangement. Emolien's eyes flickered. This talisman formation will automatically repair itself. That's right. Mu Xingqian nodded. Based on the talisman energy contained in this talisman formation, this talisman master should be a black level great talisman master or above. I'll use a spirit fire formation to trap a few pieces. You two use your power. Emolien nodded. Mu Xingqian flicked his finger, and a dozen fire spirit talismans flew over. These fire spirit talismans charged into the jade talisman formation without any hindrance, and immediately enveloped several jade talismans inside. Upon seeing this, Emolien and Duanyu promptly stepped forward. A bewitching flame rose from each of their hands and soared into that fire spirit talisman formation. After a loud bang, those jade talismans instantly turned into jade powder and dissipated into the air. Thus the trapping array was broken. However, the lightning layer above became more and more agitated, and a layer of thunder and lightning struck down. What are you striking for? Isn't it better to save your energy and strike when you break through? Duanyu grumbled irritably as he reached out to set up a defensive barrier. When he looked at Emolien, he saw that the brat had blocked the lightning bolts with a layer of black flames, completely unaffected. Let's go. Mu Xingqian was an impatient person. He summoned a water-type spirit artifact and beckoned the two of them over. As soon as the spiritual tool entered the water, it automatically sank into the water and turned into the appearance of a large carp. After Duanyu and Emolien entered together with him, the spiritual weapon started to move rapidly, speeding forward. However, the speed at which the spirit tool traveled through the water was far slower than the speed at which the three of them were flying through the lightning zone. However, now that he was ambushed and had to fight against the lightning, his speed was inevitably much slower. It would be faster to sit in the spirit tool and chase after them. Moreover, it could effectively avoid many obstacles. Who's scheming against us? Duanyu asked with a frown. It was obvious that the talisman formation was waiting for him and Emolien. If it weren't for Mu Xingqian, a great talisman practitioner who was familiar with talisman formations, perhaps he and Emolien would have to waste some more time inside that trapping array. Of course, the person who set up this array should be very clear that it was absolutely wishful thinking to completely trap them with just that talisman formation. Chapter 30-40. He was merely stalling for time. Duanyu abruptly looked up and met Emolien's eyes. Eldest brother-in-law, hurry up. Jojo is definitely in trouble. Emolien naturally thought of this as well. This person did everything possible to stop them here, so he must be targeting Jojo. Mu Xingqian also wanted this spirit tool to hurry up, but unfortunately, this spirit tool wasn't very useful. Duanyu glared at Emolien. A divine weapon master doesn't even have a spirit tool that can quickly enter the water? Prince Emo really wanted to spit on his face. After holding it in for a while, he squeezed out a word. Poor my ass. From Duanyu's understanding of this person, it must be that this punk looked down on ordinary materials and would only think of making something when he obtained the best materials. Perhaps it was because he was lazy. Moreover, with his status, he simply didn't need to be like a normal spiritual weapon master who had to make some spirit tools to sell for money in his spare time. He simply didn't need to. Can you forge it faster? Duanyu grumpily asked. How can that be possible? There's not enough time to forge it on the spot. Mu Xingqian shook his head and was about to reject Duanyu's outlandish and rude request on behalf of his brother-in-law. However, Emolien nodded. All right. Mu Xingqian was flabbergasted. Sir Jojo swiftly returned to Little Li Village and ran along the original path towards the river. How terrifying. Why did she seem to sense that person's aura slowly approaching? Sir Jojo quickly slapped an invisibility talisman on himself and rummaged through his small bag as he ran. Paradise Planet couldn't be used right now, and his divine conscience was locked by the Omega Kotoku, so he couldn't open his inner world at all. Thankfully, ever since he was tricked by the Academy's teachers, Sir Jojo liked to carry a small bag with him whenever he went out. Inside were plenty of emergency talismans and life-saving pills. She ate and ran as fast as she could. In a flash, Sir Jojo rapidly returned to the entrance of Little Lee Village and quickly ran along the original path towards the river. Damn, it was almost too late. She could almost feel that person's aura had already extended into the village. So fast. She chewed on a pill in her small mouth and rummaged through her bag. She remembered that 2 days ago, when the 9th Jade Talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome opened, an Earth-level demonstration talisman with spirituality floated down. She had probably stuffed it into her bag as a backup. Hurry up and search, got it. Ever since Arbor opened the 9th talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome, he hadn't had the time to study it properly. She had only looked at this demonstration talisman a few times, and had never drawn it. After memorizing it a few times, Jojo made up his mind, and slapped the talisman onto himself. Qin Xian's figure instantly appeared at the entrance of Little Lee Village. She looked around, and her cold gaze swept across the few pedestrians at the entrance of the village. He could clearly feel Jojo's aura just now. How did he disappear in an instant? Xian, the little girl can't have run too far. Ling chased after her all the way. He stopped in his tracks and blinked. Why has his aura disappeared? Qin Xian turned her head and glared fiercely at him. I swear, I didn't do it on purpose. Ling raised 3 fingers above his head and swore solemnly. Who knew that the little guy would be so cunning? He actually didn't hesitate to hurt himself and run away. Shut up. Qin Xian interrupted him in annoyance. Look around. Chapter 3041. All right. The few of them split up and searched in all directions. Ling chased in the direction of the river. He brushed past a 5 or 6-year-old child. She paused and turned back to look at the dirty child with a hand full of mud. Then she quickly left. The little boy was wrapped in a very old and tattered jacket. He was squatting by the roots of a tree and playing with the mud. After Feather had run far away, he raised his head slightly and looked in the direction she had left with a lightning-like gaze. Then, he retracted his gaze and patted the shabby clothes on his body. It would have been better if he didn't pat it. Now that he patted it, it was so dusty that the child coughed twice and quickly covered his mouth with his small hand. Damn it! Master Jojo gloomily straightened his small body and staggered a few steps forward. This very spiritual Earth-level demonstration talisman was called the Transformation Talisman. As the name suggested, after buying this talisman, one's appearance would change accordingly. Master Jojo only had this one transformation talisman. Naturally, she didn't know what kind of change it would cause. She thought that she could turn into a small animal or something. However, it turned out that the extent of this transformation was only from a 16-year-old girl to a 5 or 6-year-old child. The transformation time was more than 7 days. Speaking of which, it was quite tricky. Right now, she was just an ordinary farmer's child. Naturally, she had to pretend to be more realistic. There was no need for him to walk as if he was flying. The little girl waddled forward for a short distance. Sure enough, she saw Ling turn back and look at her with a deep gaze. Hee, don't think that Master Jojo is a fool. He doesn't know that you are hiding in the dark to watch the real person. She had picked up this dirty and tattered cotton-padded jacket from someone's drying rack. It fit her perfectly. Her disguise was so perfect that Ling, who had only seen her once or twice in his life, would definitely not be able to recognize her. Even if her parents were standing in front of her, they might not be able to recognize her. Hee, you want to recognize Lord Xiao Xiao's identity with your bear-like appearance? Pfft. Ling secretly laughed at his own suspicions. Then, he turned and searched in the direction of the river. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief, but his slender eyebrows furrowed. With Ling's interference, she couldn't even sneak to Du Chuanjiang's side. Forget it. I'll find a safe place to stay first. Omega Kotoku and his men searched the vicinity of the village. When they reunited, there was a hint of hesitation in their eyes. She can't run that fast. Could he have jumped into the river again? The short and fat man asked as he swung his purple golden hammer. This little girl had a fiery temper. Rather than being caught by them, she might as well jump into the river herself. There's no sign of her at all by the river. Ling Yao cast a seductive glance at the short and fat winter melon. The short winter melon immediately quivered and shut his mouth. Did you see anyone along the way? Speaking of which, I didn't see many people. You guys saw it just now. Under that tree, there was a little brat playing with mud. Ling suddenly stopped talking and looked at Omega Kotoku in astonishment. That's not right. When we used our divine sense to lock this area, it seemed that there was no sign of this brat. Let's go and find her. Omega Kotoku reacted and led his men back to the village. Hee. How many times could a group of adults be deceived by a little girl, who was neither too young nor too young? Chapter 3042. I knew there was something strange about this little brat. Feather stomped her feet and exclaimed. To think that I took a few more glances at her. I didn't expect that I would still be fooled by her. Isn't it because you're stupid? Everyone silently ridiculed her in their hearts. At this time, Arbor had already slipped into the backyard of a farmer's house. She took a boy's clothes and casually tidied herself up. She glanced at herself a few times in the water tank and hurriedly tidied her hair a little. She looked at herself worriedly and thought to herself, although my body has become smaller, I should still be able to recognize her if I look closely at her little face. The little fellow took out a herb from a small bag hidden in her cotton-padded jacket. She squeezed the juice from the root onto her palm and smeared it on her face for a while. Then, she ran to the water tank and looked at her reflection. She was so ugly that she almost cried. Her entire little face had an abnormal yellowish color, as if she had a layer of yellow paint. Even she felt disgusted looking at herself. If she walked out like this, she was sure that no one would recognize her. Not to mention, with her current appearance, even her own mother wouldn't be able to recognize her, let alone Omega Kotoku. She confidently walked out of the small courtyard and coincidentally bumped into Feather, who was searching for her. The little fellow walked past her expressionlessly, her footsteps a little unsteady. Although her face didn't show any expression, her heart was a little broken. Why was she always meeting this annoying fellow everywhere? The two of them walked past each other, the little fellow stumbling. Feather suddenly turned around and smiled at her back. She called out sweetly, Jojo. Jojo. Sama's expression didn't change, and his heart didn't skip a beat. He turned a deaf ear and pattered over. When she looked up, her mood was even more broken. Omega Kotoku and the guy with the purple golden hammer had actually followed her and were walking towards her. Jojo Sama ran over expressionlessly. She believed that with such a sallow face, even her lotus wouldn't be able to recognize her. Haha, not to mention Omega Kotoku. As long as Jojo Sama didn't say anything, who would know that this miniature version of a short winter melon was Jojo Sama? Jojo, Omega Kotoku's voice was actually very magnetic and had a hint of affection. It was quite pleasing to the ear. However, when Jojo heard this, she only felt a chill run down her spine, making her hair stand on end. Impossible. There was no way this guy would recognize her. The little fellow took large strides and calmly walked towards the direction of Du Chunjiang at the village entrance. Stop pretending. Omega Kotoku's voice came from behind her head. Even if Jojo turns into ashes, I'll still recognize him. Arbor. He must be tricking her. If she didn't calm down now, she would definitely be caught red-handed. Jojo Sama had absolute confidence. It was impossible for Omega Kotoku to tell anything from his yellowish face. You want to trick Jojo? Dream on. The little fellow continued to run forward with big steps. Ling almost laughed out loud. Why did she feel that this little fellow was so interesting? You've already revealed yourself, yet you're still lying to yourself in such a hilarious manner. Omega Kotoku flashed and blocked Arbor's path. He looked at her with a half-smile and said, Jojo, I really do recognize you. Jojo Sama hated that he couldn't slap his face. Couldn't this guy not recognize her? Why was he so annoying? Every time she was full of confidence, she felt like she was being slapped in the face. Chapter 3043. She had already disguised herself into such a ghastly appearance. So how could someone still see through her at a glance? It was completely illogical. Last time, she also thought that her disguise was perfect. In the end, let alone Emolien and Duanyu, even senior brother Situ could recognize her and greet her. Why the heck was this? This disguise was even more perfect than last time. What did this petite body look like? Her face was also smeared beyond recognition. What was going on? Sir Jojo was perplexed no matter how hard he racked his brains. His pair of pitch-black, watery eyes stared fixedly at Omega Kotoku for a long while. What exactly do you want? His words were tantamount to admitting his identity. On the other hand, Ling was grinning without saying anything, but the short and fat winter gourd, who was wielding the purple gold hammer, almost dropped it to the ground. His eyes widened as he sized up Arbor from head to toe. Fuck. Wasn't this little fellow's disguise too different? The second young master was truly impressive to be able to recognize her in this state. Arbor glanced at him impatiently. Because of your nonsense, we're even going to miss the time to go to the mystic realm. I just want to have a good chat with you. I have nothing to do with you. Second young master Chin arrived in front of her with a flash, and tapped her sallow forehead with a finger. We can talk, I promise. Arbor expressionlessly looked at him and asked after a long pause. How did you recognize me? Ling couldn't resist sniggering. She then called out coquettishly. A little miss. You couldn't have been recognized like this before, right? Just when you think your disguise is perfect, you'll be slapped in the face and recognized at any moment. The little girl expressionlessly looked at her. Nonsense. Ling couldn't resist guffawing. Shin, this little miss is quite interesting. Arbor couldn't be bothered with them, and turned around to face Sir Omega Kotoku with the back of his head. This lord is tired and can't be bothered to play a game of cat and mouse with you guys. The second young master reached out and picked her up. The little girl suddenly felt that she was a distance away from the ground. Her almond eyes stared at him, full of dissatisfaction. She roared, What are you doing? Your legs are short and you walk slowly. We still have to hurry on with our journey. Carrying you will speed up our journey. The second young master said indifferently. Arbor's mind was filled with the words, You have short legs, short legs, short legs, short legs. On the second young master's face, you couldn't see any charming expression. It was definitely the face of a gentleman. Your legs are short. This young master will help you. Ptahahaha. Ling's unbridled laughter filled the entire village. She lowered her head to look at his legs and chuckled expressionlessly. Let me ask you, if I don't walk out by myself, what are you going to do? Arbor asked indifferently as he looked at the second young master, who was only an inch away from him with a pair of cold eyes. Don't you know? Beast. Sir Jojo cursed in his heart. He stretched out his little hand and said impatiently, Give it to me. The second young master glanced at her, and placed the storage talisman that he snatched away earlier on in her palm. Shin, you and the little miss have such chemistry. Chemistry my ass, Sir Omega Kotoku and Sir Jojo said at the same time. However, the words they said were naturally different. Little miss, why are you so fierce to Shin? He's a very nice person. Ling blinked. Chapter 3044. The little girl naturally responded with an expressionless chuckle. In Ling's eyes, anyone could be considered a good person. A pervert like Omega Kotoku was actually a good person in her eyes. Jojo couldn't understand. However, the little fellow didn't know that her signature expressionless chuckle was simply adorable. You have to swear that you won't touch a single blade of grass or tree here. Arbor said coldly. Chin Xian lowered her head to look at her, and nodded without saying a word. Finally, after Zither Gongzi finished writing the oath, Lord Jojo put the oath away, and looked at him expressionlessly. Jojo's heart softened. Second Gongzi reached out, and patted her little head. Arbor snorted and tilted her head to avoid his hand. Don't be so careless. Ling almost laughed out loud. His eyes wandered around her body playfully. With your small body, it's impossible for anyone to have the thought of being careless. Jojo turned her head, and tightly pursed her little mouth. She didn't say anything. Jojo can't even be bothered to talk to you. Speaking of which, Although this village was small, there were still hundreds of families. If they were all buried in Qin Xian's hands, it would naturally be a great injustice. The main thing was, why should she bear the infamy of being the main culprit? Most people were extremely ignorant. When the time came, she would definitely be accused of being a femme fatale. One person would spread to 10, and 10 would spread to 100. Who knew what would happen in the end? When that time came, it wouldn't just be rumors of her being arrogant and despotic in the small imperial capital. She would be able to stop them at any time. Although she didn't care that much about her reputation, who would want to be secretly cursed behind her back wherever she went? It was better to put an end to these troublesome matters as soon as possible. Jojo. Second Gongzi reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair on her cheek behind her ear. You must think that it wouldn't be difficult to trick me into writing the oath and then escape, right? Arbor looked ahead expressionlessly. She couldn't be bothered to look at his face. You don't have a chance. Jojo, Sama was furious. She was indeed harboring such thoughts, but she had long predicted that her actions would be seen through. But don't say it out loud. It really made Jojo angry. You think you're the smart one? You think you're the only one who knows how to cause trouble? Can you stop threatening me with those random people I don't even know? Okay, I won't do it again. Mr. Omega Kotoka's voice was gentle. For a moment, Arbor thought he was hallucinating. What? He said okay? He actually agreed? Shouldn't he have said, stop dreaming. If you dare to run away again, I'll find a random city and use the lives of all the people in the city to threaten you. Jojo chuckled. I won't lie to you, Qin Xian said softly. As long as you don't act like a hedgehog when you see me and talk to me about everything, I'll do anything for you in the future, okay? Don't think that I don't know that you're trying to coax me like you're coaxing a pet. I don't believe you. Xiao Mu's beady black eyes swiveled around. My lotus is about to catch up. Mr. Omega Kotoka couldn't help but sneer. Not so fast. Once my run is here, you're dead. Jojo, Sama said expressionlessly. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Wait for me to get help. Mr. Omega Kotoku suddenly moved closer to her. His jade-like handsome face gradually enlarged in front of her. Chapter 3045. Sir Jojo instantly shut up and retreated vigilantly. This scoundrel actually dared to come so close. Did he want to die? The little fellow glared with her pitch-black eyes and angrily said, What are you doing? What are you doing? If you keep blabbering on and on, I'll use my own method to shut you up. Arbor! Exclamation point. No one had ever dared to be so impudent to this darling. Jojo, the little emperor, was blabbering on and on. This fellow really wanted to die. The little emperor glared at him a couple of times, glaring back. Then he retracted his gaze and turned his little head away. They quickly left the village and headed in the direction of the Red River Canyon. On the other hand, Arbor was rather taken aback and felt a bit strange. It seemed that this Omega Kotoku was still heading in the direction of the shrine, but if he wanted to forcefully take her away, shouldn't he have found a better route? Since they were heading in the direction of the Red River Canyon, then Prince Mo and the others would catch up sooner or later. She didn't know where her Lien went, nor did she know what Sapling and the others were up to. It didn't look like it was because the spirit realm was advancing. So why couldn't she contact Sapling no matter what she did? Don't worry, Mo Lien and Duan Yu won't catch up that quickly. Don't worry my ass, Arbor grumpily thought. Because flying was prohibited, Omega Kotoku and the others could only use their divine power to increase their speed. They arrived at the entrance of the Red River Canyon in the evening. Arbor strongly requested a certain someone to put her down, and climbed up a boulder that was half the height of a person. Looking down from here, they could see a deep V-shaped valley that stretched far ahead with no end in sight. The crimson rock walls were tall and dangerous, with ancient vines winding around them. They could see the afterglow of the setting sun shining at the end of the narrow path in the distance. They were standing on higher ground. If they wanted to pass through the Red River Canyon, they first had to descend from the top of this cliff. In the past, floating in the air was no problem at all. But now Jojo, Sama looked at Omega Kotoku with an expressionless face. Where is the temple? It's said to be at the end of the Red River Canyon. Second young master lowered his head to look at her and asked gently, Jojo, aren't you going to change back? With your short stature, it's not convenient for you to go down. Do you think I'm a monster? Could he transform just like that? Arbor had a cold expression that said, I don't understand what you're talking about. He turned his head, and a vine drilled out of his wrist and climbed along the rock wall. I'll go first. Everyone was speechless. With your small arms and legs, by the time you reach the bottom of the cliff, the sky will probably be dark and bright again. Mr. Jojo glanced at them. Before he could take a step forward, his arm was grabbed by the second young master. Don't mess around. Chin Xian looked at her helplessly. I'll carry you. Get lost. Was he Jojo, a loser who needed someone to carry him? Ling looked at him overjoyed. How about big sister carries you? Jojo. Sama looked down at his small arms and legs and nodded reluctantly. All right then. Seeing that you're a girl, I'll tolerate it. Ling smiled and winked at Chin Xian. Seeing that he looked like he was about to explode, she hurriedly said, Xian, don't worry. This time, I'll take good care of the little girl. I won't let her slip from my hands again. Chin Xian glanced at her indifferently. No need. Chapter 3046. The little girl jumped onto Feather's back and lay there, looking at the second young master warily. Although she had shrunk, there was nothing awkward about being with Chin Xian. However, from an emotional point of view, she was still unwilling to have any further contact with him. Being able to endure the intimacy of touching her head was already Lord Jojo's limit. The young master of Omega Kotoko looked at her helplessly and nodded. All right then. Do you think you can still object? Arbor glanced at him and pulled Feather's hair. Let's go. Feather immediately called out seductively. Hey, don't pull my hair. Who pulled your hair? The little girl's hand froze. Then she snorted and retracted her hand. Jojo, don't tell me you waited for me to climb halfway, and then retracted the vines and let me fall? Feather carried the little girl and jumped off the cliff, grabbing the green vines released by Arbor with one hand. The little girl said expressionlessly, Do you think I'm as despicable as you, a few shameless old monsters ganging up to capture a child? This child's words were really infuriating, Feather thought bitterly. Adults bullying children, old men bullying babies, men bullying women despicable. Sir Jojo snorted and turned his head to look into the distance. This area was filled with copper-colored cliffs, and at first glance, it was magnificent, especially now that she was on the cliff, looking at the narrow valley in the distance. The mountains on both sides were majestic and grand, and it looked as if a sword had broken through the path below, outlining a deep valley between heaven and earth, stretching all the way to the front. She couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. She felt that the world was so big, and human strength was so insignificant. What is Jojo thinking about? Let go of my divine sense. Arbor said impatiently. I want to go to the inner world, to find something to eat. Hungry? Feather chuckled. With a wave of his hand, he took out a carrot from his inner world, and handed it to the little girl. Arbor. She impolitely extended her fist and punched her on the head. This old monster was actually feeding her with carrots? Was Jojo a rabbit? Even a rabbit could bite when it was anxious. Violence, Ling muttered. As he spoke, he had already climbed down the cliff. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt the weight on her back lighten. Turning her head, she saw the Omega Kotoku hurriedly reach out and pull the little girl down from her back, carrying her to the side. Let go. The little fellow stomped its short legs and roared in annoyance. Impudent fellow, you actually dare to grab Lord Xiao Xiao. Who gave you the guts? Second young master put her down and stroked her little head. It's already late. Let's go to the cave abode ahead to rest for the night. We'll leave when the sun rises. Arbor looked at him in confusion. What a strange fellow. He actually dared to stop. Was he waiting for her lotus? Don't worry. With Emolien's IQ, it will take at least a day and a half for them to get here. She wanted to slap him. Arbor said angrily with a cold face. What exactly did you do? Do you want to know? Omega Kotoka lowered his head and glanced at her. He waved his hand and said, Come with me. It wasn't that she really wanted to follow him. It was just that after a day of being in the water, jumping off a cliff, and running for so long, Xiao Mu also looked a little tired. Since Omega Kotoka said that he wanted to rest for the night, then so be it. Chapter 3047. I'll let her rest for the night, and find a chance to escape tomorrow. With that thought in mind, Lady Qiao Qiao walked into a cave near the cliff. Wait a minute. Second young Master Qin lifted her up, causing a certain someone to fly up and kick him in anger. There was now another footprint on her light-colored robe. Second Sir didn't take it to heart. He turned his head and nodded to a tall and thin man beside him. That person immediately understood and stepped into the cave. Soon, they heard the hissing and roaring of snakes. After a series of swift and decisive actions, that tall and thin man stepped out of the cave and cupped his hands towards Sir Omega Kotoku. You can go in now, sir. Arbor kicked him. Put me down. Don't be noisy. Aren't you tired? Second Sir carried her into the cave and frowned slightly. Ayaya, there's a bloody smell. Ling took out a bottle from his sleeve and sprinkled it here and there. After a while, the bloody smell faded and a faint fragrance wafted out of the cave. The fragrance powder from the fragrance shop has pretty good ability to remove the smell. Ling put away the things complacently. When he turned around and saw the little girl's disdainful expression, he couldn't help but be stunned. What's wrong? It stinks. She felt nauseous and wanted to vomit when she smelled the inferior fragrance powder. As she spoke, she really stomped her feet and ran out to vomit. Ling had a blank look on his face as he sniffed around. He sniffed around and sniffed around. Where is the stench? Isn't it very fragrant? Hey, little fellow, the fragrance powder from the fragrance shop is very expensive. Just this small bottle of fragrance powder costs 500 spirit coins. Arbor vomited for a while. When she turned around, her face was slightly pale. It was obvious that she wasn't faking it. How are you? Second Sir looked at her worriedly and turned to glare at Ling. Go get rid of that smell. Ling looked wronged and said pitifully, how do I get rid of it? Go get some hay to clean up the smell. Oh. Ling pulled the tall and skinny man out of the cave. Not long after, he chopped a bundle of tree branches and brought them in. After burning for a while, Lady Qiao Qiao walked back into the cave with a look of disgust on her face. She took out a medicinal herb from the small bag she carried with her, crushed it, and sprinkled the medicinal powder all over the walls. Only then did she feel much better. Expensive doesn't mean good. Mr. Jojo looked at Ling with disdain. What kind of good spices can be sold in that shop? Her incense-making skills are really not that good. It was hard to imagine that there would be a group of people in the capital following him. It was simply hilarious. Ling blinked. Little girl, do you have any good spices to sell? Oh right, you're an alchemist, so you must know a lot of ways to beautify your skin. Tell me about them. You're an old monster. You're already so old. Yet you're still thinking about beautifying yourself. You're simply shameless. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. Do you want a special beautifying cream? It improves the quality of the skin and nourishes the skin. It's most suitable for people who are always on the move outside, exposed to the wind, sun and rain. Yes, yes, yes. Ling's eyes suddenly brightened, and she nodded repeatedly. 1,000,000 spirit coins for a bottle. Everyone's lips twitched as they subconsciously glanced at the second young master. Omega Kotoku was baffled. It wasn't like this little girl had been selling things for a day or two. Why was she looking at him? Chapter 3048. It's so expensive. Can it be cheaper? Ling blinked and asked with a pained expression. Shameless. You want to cheat me of my money. You're an old monster who has lived for hundreds of years. How can you lack money? Haha, don't be funny. 990,000 is the lowest price, Arbor said expressionlessly. You just said that expensive doesn't necessarily mean good. It's different if it's expensive. I definitely have my own reasons for being expensive. Arbor interrupted him coldly. Are you buying it or not? I only have one bottle. Buy. Ling felt pained as he took out the money. Can you give me something extra? The short and fat man's eyebrows and mouth twitched. Looking at the scene in front of him, he felt indescribably strange. Does this kid have any self-awareness as a hostage? He's actually peddling business among us. Forget it, forget it. You're so long-winded. Since you carried me all the way here, I'll give you a 3-day beautifying pill. What does a 3-day beautifying pill mean? Arbor looked at him, as if he was looking at an idiot. It means that you can try it for 3 days. Once you take this beautifying pill, you can feel the unique beautifying effect for 3 days. After 3 days, you'll return to your original appearance. You can buy a permanent beautifying pill for 2 million spirit coins. Everyone was speechless. You're not only evil, but you're also good at doing business. A 3-day trial period? You're obviously setting a trap for Ling, who loves to show off, to jump into it. Okay, I'll try. Ling nodded and reluctantly took out money to buy a bottle of beautifying cream and a beautifying pill for a 3-day trial. If you use it well, you can introduce it to your old sisters. Arbor said expressionlessly. Our shop is near Huachi Street in the south of the city. It's called Heavenly Pill House. You can go there and take a look when you have time. This time, even Ling couldn't help but twitch his mouth and look at Arbor, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What the hell is an old sister? Okay, let's go to sleep. Arbor was exhausted after a long day. He stretched out his small hand in front of the Omega Kotoku. Betting. This group of people had sealed her divine sense and prevented her from using her inner world. Apart from the few things she could use in her small pouch, she couldn't take out anything else. Aren't you hungry? Mr. Omega Kotoku raised his hand and patted her head. Let's eat first. Sir Jojo originally wanted to reject this fellow, but after thinking about it, he realized that he would only have the strength to run if he was full. Thus, with a stoic expression, he stomped over to the fire and sat down. Apart from young Master Omega Kotoku and Ling, the other 4 God State warriors were the short and fat man, Fei Zhuang, the tall and thin man, and the twin brothers Tang Quan and Tang Li. Among them, the fat guy who was at the 7th level of the God realm had the highest cultivation. At this time, the 2 brothers, Tang Quan and Tang Li, were sitting in front of the fire, busily roasting 2 wild game. The fat guy had pulled out the tendons and skinned the snake that had been entrenched in the cave before, planning to make snake stew, or something for everyone. Arbor was a bit disdainful, but when the snake stew was served, the aroma was very tempting. She took the small bowl that the fat guy handed over and drank 2 mouthfuls. She realized that this person's cooking was really good. As a result, Xiao Qiao's tense brows relaxed a little after eating the meal. Ling secretly winked at young Master Omega to anyone, using his eyes to signal to him. Can you tell? This is a little foodie. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, in the middle of the night, Sir Jojo carried his bedding to the dry haystack in the corner of the wall, and walked out of the cave rolled around Chapter 3050 under the pitch black night sky. Was it because she had self-detonated her soul before? Only a faint ray of moonlight shone on the person outside the cave. Xiao Mu's footsteps Omega Kotoka looked down at her and expressionlessly walked past him. No matter what happened in the past, further. At least after she finished relieving herself, I want to get along with you. She walked past him again with a wooden expression. Start from the beginning. Xiao. Arbor's gaze wavered slightly, sighed and he thought, I remember everything now. To start from the beginning. Mu's body stiffened in fright from never return to the way they were in the beginning. And her hair stood on end. Firstly, as she looked at him warily. The mood is completely different. The young master of Omega Kotoku waved at her. Here, seeing that she was still completely different away from him, this is the so-called didn't want to come over at all. He walked to her side, pulled her hand, and sat down on a stone stool. A burst of ghostly wails and howls came from all directions. Had a strange expression that said, looked up and saw men and women dressed in native attire, sliding down the mountain from head to toe. After another like agile monkeys. About you. They held weapons in their hands. Although some of my memories are yelled crazily. In the blink of an eye, a lot of information. The 2 of them were surrounded in the middle. Sir Jojo looked at these monkey-like natives expressionlessly. You recognized me the moment you saw me at the entrance. She was just a child at the moment. Estate. And if anything happened, looked at him coldly. The adults would take the blame. After a while, she squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. This area should be the territory of the Red River tribe. Is it really nonsense? But looking at the attire of these natives, they clearly looked like aliens dressed in bright red walked around in his palm. Although the figure was very faint, hundreds of natives surrounded the features were especially clear, and the commotion was so big that it drew all over when she saw others out of the cave. And she almost jumped up from the stone stool. She reached out to grab the figure. Xiao Mu
What
was
is
at a
this?
loss for words
This
as
is half
those
of your
natives
soul.
waved their hands
Has
and
your
feet
soul
in front
been
of
very
them.
unstable ever since you reincarnated?
Who are you
That's
people?
because your soul
Ling touched his
self-destructed
handsome
in your
little
previous
face and
life.
shouted angrily.
Arbor's pupils
Why did you come to
contracted.
disturb my
She was
sleep in
dazed
the
for
middle
a
of the
while
night
before she couldn't help but ask.
How did you
A
know?
woman who looked
This
like
is
the
just
leader
my
of the
deduction
natives
and guess.
revealed her black belly.
Actually, my
and held a
memories
cane
of
in
this
her
period
hand.
are also
The
very
moment
vague.
she raised it high,
Omega
all the
Katoka stared
voices
at her
disappeared
intently,
in succession.
his fingers twitching
The woman
slightly.
who looked like the leader
Finally,
pondered
he
for a
couldn't
while
help but rub
and
her
suddenly
temples.
said word by word
Jojo,
in
you're
stiff
back.
imperial capital
Shouldn't we
language.
let bygones be bygones?
This mountain is mine.
Think about how
This
grateful
tree was
you were to
planted
me
by
when
me.
I carried you out of
The
the
corners
tunnel.
of Ling's mouth
If it
twitched.
wasn't for that woman
His head
from
was
the Sir
shrouded
family,
in black fog.
we would have been
He
married
raised
and
his
even.
eyes and glanced
Why
at the
are there
second
so
young
many
master's
ifs?
darkened face
Arbor
through the
reached out
crowd.
to grab the
At
wisp
this
of soul
moment,
in his palm.
the native female
There are
leader
no
had
ifs.
already read out
There
the
will
words
never be
leave
ifs.
behind the toll.
She thought that
Suddenly,
Chinexan
in
wouldn't
the middle
give
of
it to
the
her
crowd
so
in the
easily.
void,
But
a circular
unexpectedly,
vortex
he didn't
suddenly
stop
appeared.
her.
As if an
Instead,
endless
he
stream of
silently
air was
watched
being
her
sucked
take back
into
the
it.
broken shadow
The few
soul
natives
body.
were caught off guard
With such
for
a
a
bad
moment.
personality,
Their faces
you
were
deserve
slightly
to be
pale
single
as
your
they
whole
stabilized
life.
their bodies.
Jojo snorted.
They were almost
How
pulled
many
over
other
by the
soul
airflow.
remembrance like this
The
do I have
Aborigine leader
outside?
was shocked
Chin
and
Exan
quickly
couldn't
knelt down
help
with
but
his
laugh.
clansmen.
This is your
As he
soul
kowtowed,
remembrance. You
he
should
muttered
know
some
best.
words that no one
But
could
she didn't
understand.
remember anything?
In the void
Lord
vortex,
Jojo glanced
a
at him
long strand
unhappily,
of black
thinking,
hair suddenly
how
brushed
could he not
out,
know about it?
followed by a
She
slender hand
subconsciously
that
pulled
reached
out the
and
crescent-shaped
grabbed the edge of the
pendant
void,
hanging around
pulling
her
it
neck.
slightly to
Ever
the left
since her
and right.
master gave her this
Half of her body
soul-calming
peeked
chilled
out from the
jade,
hole.
her soul
Under
had
the
been
night
much more
sky,
stable.
there was a hint of coldness and seduction. Prince Mo's cold gaze fell on everyone present. His pair of cold eyes stared coldly at Chinexan. So it's you who is playing tricks. Although the young master
Chapter
of Omega
3051
Katoku didn't show it
Prince
on his
Emo
face,
leaped out of the
he was
tear in the
very
void.
shocked on the inside.
This was clearly a bit
not
frightening.
for anything else.
For a moment,
but Emo
everyone was
method
caught
of
off
tearing
guard
open
and
the
did
void,
not react.
and suddenly
They
appearing
stared at
was
him
really
in a daze.
shocking. Lady Xiao's eyes lit up slightly. She stretched out two small hands eagerly. But then she lowered her head and looked at herself in distress. He was so small, and his body was like a little bean sprout. Emo Lien appeared in front of Sir Jojo in a flash. She reached out and picked him up. Her eyes were full of confusion. Jojo, how did they do this to you? This was not caused by anyone else. It was Lady Qiao Qiao who had dug a hole for herself and willingly jumped into it. But would Sir Jojo tell him? No. Bang! A strange-looking spiritual weapon that looked like a big-headed carp flew out of the tear in the void and landed on the ground with two thuds. Soon a white figure flashed out of it. His body swayed a little, and then he stood aside with narrowed eyes. Then, Mu Xingqian used his speed to escape from the big carp spirit weapon. He rushed to the side of a tree, leaned against the tree, and started vomiting. Big brother, what's wrong? Sir Jojo looked at Emo Lien in confusion. It's nothing. He's probably dizzy and wants to vomit. Emo Lien touched his little face and looked at him worriedly. Jojo, wait for me here. She then put the little guy down and looked coldly at the people from Omega Katoku. A bundle of black fire instantly lit up in his hand, and Emo Lien arrived beside Second Qin and the others in the blink of an eye, making a move without saying a word. At this time, Second Qin had already recovered from his slight shock, and he looked at him with a rather grave expression as he asked, You comprehended the power of nothingness for the other three special powers outside of the five spirits? He tore open the void and rushed over. No one could imagine how he did it. The power of nothingness had disappeared for nearly 1,000 years. The talent of the crown prince of the divine land was simply demonic. Catch my Jojo? You sealed her divine sense, didn't you? Emo Lien couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on him. And with a thought, a silver longsword jumped out of his hand. You were the one who set up the trapping formation in the Du Chunjiang to stop us, right? Emo Lien narrowed her eyes and said coldly, Explode. Boom. The self-destruction of a spiritual weapon was already unstoppable, let alone a divine weapon. On the side, Ling's expression shifted slightly. Just as he wanted to charge over, he was blocked by Duanyu, who flashed forward. The young man was dressed in white and looked elegant and handsome. He blinked his peach blossom eyes and said to her with a smile that was not a smile, You want to gang up on me? Your opponent is me. You think you can stop me? Ling was still grinning. With a twist of his finger, a narrow and sharp dagger landed in his palm. 10 moves. Duanyu curled his lips and said with a nod, If I can last 10 moves, what will you say, ladyboy? Hee hee. Ling's eyes narrowed into crescents. Little big brother, you can talk after you fight. Sir Jojo, who was originally expressionlessly watching from the side, suddenly shifted his eyes in Ling's direction. The more he listened to the two's conversation, the more he felt something was amiss. Suddenly, Sir Jojo glared with his hands on his hips and pointed at Ling. He looked up and asked Duan Yu, "What? What did you say? You called her a ladyboy? And you called her a ladyboy? Chapter 30 she's a man?" Duan Yu's handsome face darkened, and he suspiciously sized up the little fellow. "You think he's a girl?" Arbor was flabbergasted. "Ah, my dear Qiao, could it be that you were taken advantage of by this punk?" "No," the little fellow expressionlessly replied. Duan Yu abruptly burst into laughter and looked her up and down, his gaze involuntarily revealing a hint of mockery. "That's true. How could someone take advantage of you with your childish appearance?" Xiao Qiao's face was expressionless. Her wooden face was expressionless. "Don't think that your freaking laughter can cover up your amused expression. Then can you tell me why you became like this?" As Duan Yu spoke, he had already pulled out his handy raven bone fan and flew it towards Feather. "Do you think I'll tell you?" "Ha ha." Sir Jojo pursed his lips and didn't say a word. Clang clang. Two crisp sounds clashed, and a faint trace of hesitation involuntarily slipped through Feather's eyes. This punk in front of him looked like he was at the God Realm, but the power he contained was far above the God Realm. There wasn't much of a difference between him and him? What was going on? Could it be that this punk also used an aura-concealing talisman or something similar, and used a smokescreen to lower his cultivation realm? When Fei Zhuang and the twin brothers, Tang Quan and Tang Li, saw this, they were about to fly over when the surrounding natives started making a ruckus again. A native elderly walked up and suddenly prostrated himself on the ground. Tears streamed down his face as he whimpered about something unknown. This elderly man spoke a string of words, but Sir Jojo expressed that he didn't understand a single word. Tang Quan and Tang Li's path was blocked by several hundred natives and couldn't pass at all. A vicious glint flashed through Tang Quan's eyes, and he was about to impatiently split these natives apart. Unexpectedly, Emolien, who was fighting with the young Master Omega Kotoku, turned around and mumbled something to that native elderly man. That old geezer immediately revealed a deeply grateful expression and bowed several times toward Emolien. Behind him, the native female chief also knelt down with the group of natives and piously kowtowed several times to Crown Prince Emo, before retreating to the side with her people. Everyone looked at our dear Emolien in bewilderment. Lady Qiao Qiao's face was also filled with confusion. Jojo's Lotus actually knew how to speak the native language? Who knew what he was babbling about earlier? But those natives' expressions when they looked at him were all very reverent, practically worshipping him as a god. Right now, Emolien didn't have the time to explain too much to other people. His entire mind was focused on second young Master Qin. The moment he raised his hands slightly, a few faint wisps of black flames floated up from his side, slowly condensing and shrinking. The black flames were like blooming ink-colored lotuses, floating around his body, and very quickly, they bloomed in clusters. Omega Kotoku's expression changed slightly, and the moment he took a few steps back, he saw the ink-colored lotuses streaking across his eyes like shooting stars, all gathering in front of him. Suddenly, there was a loud tremor, and all the ink-colored lotuses bloomed to the peak at the same time. Suddenly, as if they couldn't withstand this huge force, they all shattered and turned into fine powder, shooting towards the young Master Omega Kotoku from all directions. "Young Master!" The thin red blood vessels in Tang Quan's eyes were about to burst. This time, not to mention the second young master, even if Ling was in front of him, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. However, Ling was also secretly shocked, Yu's hand and exerted strength and turned into a streak of light towards the direction of Omega into a sharp sword, charging towards Feather's back with a terrifying demonic fire. If Feather wanted to dodge, he would definitely not be able to reach young Master Omega Kotoku in time. As a result, he could only grit his teeth and forcibly endure Duan Yu's strike. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at Second Qin's side and reached out to catch more than half of the ink-colored lotus flower powder in front of him. His expression abruptly changed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood with a pft. his figure swayed. The second young master was not in a much better state. Although Feather had swiftly blocked for him, there was still a huge disparity between his cultivation and Emolien's. Even with Feather blocking in front, the remaining portion of energy flew towards him, causing his expression to turn unsightly. The instant he supported Feather and retreated swiftly, young Master Omega Kotoka whistled, and suddenly threw out a transportation talisman matrix. That talisman matrix flickered, and the people in front of them disappeared at the same time. Emolien stopped after 2 steps and reached out to stop Duanyu, who wanted to give chase. At this time, the dumbfounded Mu Xingqian had also rushed over with a pale face. He couldn't resist asking, "They ran away?" "They ran away." Duanyu nodded and glanced at Mu Xingqian. "Are you alright, big brother?" Emolien instantly cast a glance at Duanyu. This punk called him big brother so intimately. He really didn't freaking treat himself as an outsider. Arbor expressionlessly watched young Master Omega Kotoku and his group flee rapidly before shifting her gaze to Emolien and Duanyu. She shook her head helplessly and inwardly criticized. Men are actually quite belligerent. While she was pondering, Emolien had already rushed to her side and picked her up. She looked at her strangely and asked, "Jojo, are you feeling unwell? Did those people from Omega Kotoka capture you? Did they do anything to you?" Arbor glanced at Prince Emo. "I don't think they would dare to do anything to me." "Then why do you look like that? What's wrong with my appearance?" The little guy snorted and raised his little head slightly. With a calm expression he said, "Isn't that good?" "Uft." Duanyu very shamelessly laughed out loud. Mu Xingqian, on the other hand, sized up Arbor with a dumbfounded expression and cried out involuntarily, "Sister, you, how did you do this? How could this be? Did they give you some kind of poisonous medicine that harmed you?" "Big brother, you can rest assured." Duanyu snickered and interrupted the nervous Mu Xingqian. He said with a chuckle, "Based on my many years of experience interacting with Jojo, I can tell that Jojo is a very good person. This little guy must have made a talisman and cheated himself." Mr. Jojo looked at them expressionlessly. Mu Xingqian couldn't resist twitching his mouth and looked at his sister curiously. "Sister, is what Duanyu said true? What the hell would he know?" Mr. Jojo harumphed haughtily. "Jojo, that time when you didn't recognize your family and didn't even recognize us. It couldn't be that you also used a strange talisman to turn yourself into that state, right?" Duanyu suddenly felt like he had discovered the truth, because he saw Mr. Jojo's increasingly stoic face looking at him expressionlessly. Based on his understanding of the little guy, even when the little guy's heart was crumbling, he would always put on a front nonsense. Mr. Jojo roared. Chapter 3054. Waving her small hand impatiently, the little fellow glanced at the sardonic Emolien. "Hurry and release my divine sense shackles." Emolien nodded and gently brushed her small head. Just as she was about to leave with her in her arms, she saw the native tribe's female leader jogging over. She knelt down in front of Emolien with a plop, repeatedly kowtowing and chanting some gibberish that people couldn't understand at all. Arbor's head was filled with black lines as he looked at that native tribe's female leader, before looking up at Lien, who was hugging him. Prince Emo was unperturbed as he chattered with that female leader, before turning to Duanyu and saying, "They invited us to their tribe to stay the night." Duanyu glanced at that simple and crude cave and nodded. "That's fine too." That female leader and her entourage appeared very happy when they agreed, and they kept chattering with Emolien in a strange language along the way. Emolien would occasionally reply to her, which made that female leader dance with joy. "What are you talking about?" Arbor asked expressionlessly. Could they not speak the bird language that Sir Jojo couldn't understand? Emolien couldn't help but want to laugh as she hugged Jojo and softly explained. Their female leader is called Dawa, and that elderly man is their tribe's sage Hook. Cough, did they want to rob us just now? MHM. Arbor blinked, looking like a curious baby. The female leader, Dawa, had already finished reciting the words, "This road is opened by me." But she suddenly became terrified. It was unknown why. Lady Qiao Qiao was still thinking that whoever dared to rob her, she would beat them up. In the end, her violent side did not have a place to show its power. When Emolian looked down at this Jojo, she couldn't help but recall the pile of babies moving gold ores she saw inside the Tower of Punishment. They climbed up the gold ores one by one, their eyes sparkling with the light of gold as their small hands and feet continuously moved the gold ores. So interesting. Her heart was about to be melted by this little imp. Emolian lowered her body and said with a smile, "They came from the desert outside the Forgetfulness River and traveled all the way here. With such a large group of people, they naturally wouldn't dare to enter the city rashly." Arbor nodded. He knew very well that if these hundreds of people were to march into the city at the same time, it would definitely arouse the vigilance of the city guards. It might even lead to a large-scale conflict. They planned to stay at the Red River tribe's place for a while and hand over the documents to the nearby cities. Because we're lacking in resources and this Red River Canyon belongs to the Red River tribe, we have to pay rent to the Red River tribe if we want to hunt anything. So they wanted to do a free trade. However, as soon as the trade started, I tore through space and appeared. Emolian muttered in her ear. The natives believe in the heavens and think that this is a warning from the heavens for their evil deeds. Arbor nodded. No wonder they all respected Emolian like she was a god. Could it be that they thought that Emolian, who tore through space, was an emissary sent by the heavens? How do you know the language of the natives? I don't know too much. Emolian winked at him and said with a smug expression, Jojo, do you admire your husband's ability? Sir Jojo nodded his small head. Emolian laughed. Did Jojo use a strange talisman to make yourself like this? Sir Jojo nodded his small head again, and then suddenly reacted. Chapter 3055. Sir Jojo was actually tricked by Jojo's lotus. Jerk, how could he speak like this? One question was linked to another completely unrelated question, causing her to be unable to react in time and freaking answer truthfully. Such a deep trap, simply impossible to guard against. The little fellow scowled and leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm so sleepy, I want to sleep. Too lazy to talk to you guys. She clearly heard Big Brother and Duan Yu's muffled laughter behind them. How could they be so loathsome? However, Emolian shook her with a smile. What sleep? We've reunited after a long separation. So shouldn't we have a good chat? How is it long? It had only been a day. The little fellow glanced at him. What do you want to say? Weren't you curious why hubby can communicate with the natives? Let me tell you, your husband has learned a lot since he was young. Prince Emo boasted repeatedly in front of his wife. I know everything from astronomy to geography, and I've read extensively. There's nothing I don't know. Sir Jojo pursed her lips. Go ahead and brag. Don't you feel awkward making yourself sound like you're omnipotent? What's with that expression? Prince Emo rubbed her small face. Why aren't you saying that hubby is so awesome? Sir Jojo was exasperated. She looked up at him and pinched his face. Very thick. Cough, cough, cough. Mu Xingchen couldn't hold back his laughter and coughed to cover it. Big brother, you vomited for a long time just now. Are you feeling better now? Sir Jojo turned to ask. Much better. It would have been better if he didn't mention it, because Mu Xingchen felt a bit awkward. After all, he actually vomited from the bumpy air when he thought of this. Mu Xingchen couldn't help but take a deep look at Emolian. This brother-in-law of his truly concealed his strength, and was very frightening. The three types of power that wandered outside of the five spirits were the power of the dark netherworld, the power of deprivation bestowed by the gods, and his brother-in-law's power of nothingness. It was said that the power of nothingness could form terrifying flames of nothingness in the later stages, capable of incinerating everything in the world. Brother-in-law was already in control of the sacred fire, which was feared by many. If he were to comprehend the fire of nothingness, he would be unrivaled in the world. Sir Jojo moved his little hands and feet, and expressionlessly said to Mu Xingchen, who was deep in thought, Big brother, come here for a moment. Mu Xingchen hurried over. Sister, what's the matter? Mr. Jojo took out an antiemetic pill from his inner world and handed it to him. Take it. You won't feel nauseous after taking it. Okay. Mu Xingqian still had a headache and nausea, but he wasn't as dizzy as before. His symptoms were naturally caused by the tearing of the void. Not everyone could be as careless as Duan Yu, who was unaffected by the tearing of the void. The female leader of the natives stepped forward and bowed respectfully to Emolian before muttering a few words in her language. Emolian nodded at her and then said to everyone, "Their tribe's gathering place is just up ahead." Arbor lay on his shoulder and squinted sleepily. "I'll sleep for a while first." "Okay." Her current body was that of a 5 or 6-year-old child. Speaking of which, after this body shrunk, some of her bodily functions seemed to have returned to a 5 or 6-year-old child. It was truly worrying. That female chief muttered something, but Arbor had already blocked it. Chapter 3056. Sir Jojo was woken up by a series of noisy noises. When he opened his eyes, it was already dawn. Outside, many natives had already come out of their tents and were preparing piping hot steamed buns and rice porridge. The clamor didn't stop. Sir Jojo turned over and saw Prince Emo lying on his side next to her with one hand propping up his chin and looking at her with a grin. She rolled her eyes and expressionlessly turned over again, planning to continue sleeping. However, Emo Lien didn't let her continue sleeping. He picked her up and said with melancholy, "Sigh, it's really worrying that wifey has become so small." The little fellow's face flushed red, and she couldn't say anything for a long time. "Jojo, what do you want to eat for breakfast?" "Shrimp dumplings and bird's nest porridge," the little fellow said expressionlessly. "Wow, hubby really understands wifey's heart. He's already prepared it for you." Although the little fellow didn't show it on her face, she was smiling on the inside. She pursed her lips and commanded, "Put me down." "That won't do. You're so short that even walking 2 steps is so slow. You're not even as tall as the basin rack. Hubby should wash you while carrying you. You're the short one. Your entire Emo family is short." Sir Jojo ridiculed in his mind and harumphed. "Put Sir Jojo on the stool." Emo Lien held back his laughter and nodded reluctantly. He still obeyed, and fetched a stool for the little fellow, and placed it in front of the basin rack. The little stoic expressionlessly started washing up. As she washed, she roasted in her mind. "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have dug a hole for myself, Jojo. Since you transformed into this appearance, why didn't you take the chance to escape? I was waiting for you." Arbor wiped his face with a wet handkerchief and casually tossed it into the basin before jumping off the stool. Emo Lien's figure flashed and arrived next to her. He stretched out his arm and pulled her into his embrace again. "Your husband prepared a sumptuous breakfast for you early in the morning. Are you happy?" Emo Lien carried her out of the tent with a grin. His footsteps paused, and he lowered his head to whisper to her. "Xiao Xiao changed her mind and stayed because of those people from Little Li Village, right?" Arbor was silent for a while, but he still nodded. "If I don't show up, Omega Kotoku will most likely bring people to massacre the entire village." "Oh, why do you say that?" Emo Lien's eyes flashed as she lowered her head to look at her little face. Arbor's heart tightened, and he felt that his voice was a little hoarse. It was because she understood Second Chin's personality better than anyone else. Back then, they had been together for such a long time. Bits and pieces of memories could be blurry, but some of the pain engraved in the bottom of their hearts could not be erased. She didn't want to lie to Jojo's run. She didn't want to lie to him about anything. So she said, "Didn't I tell you before that I had a very long dream?" Emo Lien's breathing subsequently tightened as he nodded his head. "In my dream, he was there, that person. In my dream, Omega Kotoku was a very stubborn person. Although I wanted to leave the people of Xiaoli village behind and escape by myself, it's not impossible. But in the end I still can't gamble with so many people's lives. I know that person's personality. If it was him in my dream, he would have attacked. He would not hesitate to use the lives of the villagers to threaten me. I also thought about it carefully. Should I leave all of this alone? Or should I stay for the sake of those villagers I don't know?" Chapter 3057. In the end, I followed my heart and stayed. However, if that person wants to use the lives of those villagers to threaten me, I can't guarantee what choice I will make. A large part of the reason she stayed behind for the sake of the old grandpa and Nyo Nyo was for the sake of these villagers. She was this kind of person. As long as someone showed her a trace of kindness, she would return it with 10 points or more. Moreover, she also had her own pride in her heart. She didn't want to implicate some strangers because of her. But now, something seemed to have changed a bit from her previous life. Sir Jojo blinked in confusion as he recalled what Sir Omega Katoka said to him. No matter what the past was, at least now, I want to get along well with you. Could they really continue to get along well? Alright Jojo, don't think about it anymore. Emolian gently touched her forehead. I know what you will choose. You little fellow, who is stubborn but soft-hearted, will definitely choose to stay. I will support you no matter what you do. Emolian shook her body and said with a smile. Just do what you want to do. Don't go against your heart. Arbor smiled at him. Jojo's lotus was the best. It was so easy to talk to Jojo's lotus. Morning Jojo. Morning younger sister. Sir Jojo turned around and saw Duan Yu and Mu Xingchen coincidentally walking over from outside the tent. When they saw them, they waved and greeted her. Sir Jojo's mood instantly brightened up. Who cares about those things that haven't happened yet? Why should I care so much about them? Different situations call for different measures. She had many friends and relatives by her side in this life, so it couldn't be as desolate as in her previous life. Morning eldest brother. Morning Duan Yu. Sir Jojo expressionlessly waved at them. Do you want to roast meat? I can roast some for you. Mu Xingchen's eyes lit up, and he was about to nod with a smile when he felt someone poke his waist. Duan Yu said with a grin. Yeah, how could I let my chow roast meat? What's more, with your short stature, it's not convenient for you to do such heavy work. Jojo, leave the ingredients to me. I'll do it. You're the one with 5 shortcomings. Your entire Rong family has 5 shortcomings. Sir Jojo's stoic face was expressionless as he took out ingredients from his inner world and handed them to Duan Yu. He looked at him in confusion and asked, Duan Yu, is my barbecue really that hard to swallow? How could that be? Duan Yu blinked before turning to smile at her. Jojo's barbecue is delicious. It's just that you're so young now, so it's not appropriate for you to barbecue. On the side, Mu Xingchen put on an indifferent expression and glanced askance at Duan Yu. He couldn't help but chuckle in his mind. Your Highness, do you know how exaggerated and unrealistic your expression is? Sir Jojo nodded. Let me think. My roasted meat shouldn't taste that bad. Peach Blossoms and the others are fighting over the food I roast. Duan Yu's mouth involuntarily twitched. Just how much did the venerable celestial want to die? Husband. Emolian coughed lightly and nodded in all seriousness. Jojo's roasted colorful divine fish is especially delicious. When we're free, I'll have Jojo roast it for you guys. I'm thanking your entire family. Duan Yu silently swept a glance at Emolian before carrying the ingredients to where the natives were gathered. When the native sage saw Emolian and the others coming over, he quickly stood up with his clansmen. Chapter 3058. The native female chief was deeply grateful, leading her clansmen to hurriedly thank Emolian and the others. Jojo, Darren and the others naturally couldn't understand the native female chief, who was passionately chattering in front of them. Listening to the end, Jojo turned to look at Emolian. What did she say? She was praising your husband for his benevolence, for being the husband of the great divine province, and for having a beautiful wife, saying that the two of us are especially compatible. Jojo, Darren looked down at his own short arms and legs, and couldn't help but chuckle in his heart. Her husband felt that he couldn't understand the native female chief's words, so he blindly translated it. With her small appearance, how could she be especially compatible with her husband? A match made in heaven? Did her husband think she was retarded? It's true. Emolian looked at her especially seriously. I never lie to my chow. I wrote a letter to the city lord of the nearby Spring City. In 5 days, they should be able to move into the city and settle down. Emolian said with a smile. So this Dewa and Sage are especially grateful to your husband. As soon as I told them that you are my wife, they naturally praised you to the heavens. Jojo, Darren's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Emolian continued. Let's stay here for another day or two. This is the only way to the Sun Moon Temple. You can rest assured that Holy Sun Mi Yin will definitely pass by here with his people. Let's just stay here and wait for them. Arbor. So Holy Sun Mi Yin and the others were still floating in the Duchun River? Why did she suddenly feel that Holy Sun Mi Yin was a bit miserable? Jojo, what's wrong? No, nothing. Arbor waved her small hand, and was carried by Emo Lien to the small table to sit down. Soon, a sumptuous breakfast was served. Arbor didn't have the heart to care about anything else, and focused on eating her shrimp dumplings and bird's nest porridge. As for Holy Sun Mi Yin, I just let him float. 2 days later, the female leader of the Aborigines warmly received a messenger from Spring City. That night, she bid farewell to the Crown Prince, and followed the messenger from Spring City, leading all the Aborigines to migrate to Spring City. On the 3rd day, close to the evening, this empty tent camp finally welcomed a group of old, weak, sick and disabled people. When Holy Sun Mi Yin saw Emo Lien and the others, he let out a sigh of relief and said, "Ah, Prince Mo, Prince Chun, you are all here?" It turned out that these people were much faster than them. In the past 3 to 4 days, Holy Sun Mi Yin had been drifting on the Duchun River. At first he swayed in the wrong direction, and then turned back. After repeating this several times, he finally determined the direction. That was why he rushed over so late. Moreover, he had not been doing well these past few days. On one hand, he was worried about the whereabouts of Emo Lien and the others. On the other hand, he was worried that something might have happened to the temple. He firmly believed that the mutation of the Saintess had nothing to do with the temple. It was most likely that the Saintess had secretly joined some evil cult, which was why she got into trouble. How could such a mutated monster appear in their Sun Moon Temple, which was bright and virtuous? Impossible. Holy Sun Mi Yin led a group of people who had soaked on the river for a long time, and finally climbed ashore with great difficulty. They walked towards Emo Lien and Duan Yu. Thankfully you are all fine. Everyone, take a look again, and see if any of your companions are absent. We plan to rest here for 3 days. And then, Holy Sun Mi Yin paused, and his odd gaze landed on Arbor. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Eh? You, how did you become like this?" Chapter 3059. Sir Jojo expressionlessly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yin. "Who are you?" Prince Mo, Duan Yu, and Mu Xingchen couldn't resist twitching their mouths. This little fellow's tricks were quite deep. She pretended to be so serious as if it was real. Holy Sun Mi Yin was evidently taken aback by this little stoic face, and he couldn't help but ask suspiciously, You? Aren't you Qiao, Miss Qiao?" "Nonsense." The little girl's face was cold as she said indifferently, "Don't try to claim kinship with me. I don't know you, we don't know each other at all." Holy Sun Mi Yin glanced at Prince Mo, before looking at Duan Yu, and Mu Xingchen in confusion. "You're the one spouting nonsense. Do you think I'm stupid? This stoic face of yours doesn't change no matter where you go. Do you think other people can't recognize you? Arbor." She hurriedly turned to look at her husband and asked with a straight face, "Is it true?" Emo Lien tugged at the corner of her lips. It was truly difficult for her to restrain herself, but she nodded. "Yes." Sir Jojo reflexively rubbed his face, feeling melancholy and vexed. It was simply baffling. So it was like this. The reason why Sir Jojo could be seen through at a glance every time was entirely because this little face was stoic? Stoic? Was it really so easy to recognize a stoic face? The little fellow looked at the Crown Prince in bewilderment before glancing at Duan Yu, who was stifling his laughter. She silently turned to Holy Sun Mi Yin and said, "Holy Sun, your eyesight is quite good." "Sir Holy Sun." Fuck. Why did he inexplicably have the urge to burst into laughter? This child must be dim-witted. After being exposed, she still said such hilarious words. Arbor also felt a bit stifled. If possible, he really didn't want to talk to this Holy Sun Mi Yin. The feeling of having your identity exposed at any moment was truly too unpleasant. Cough, cough, cough. Mu Xingchen hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over for his little sister. "By the way, Saint, have you seen our other teammates?" At that time, everyone was floating around in the Duchun River,
so we didn't have time to care too much. The Holy Sun looked at Mu Xingchen with a sincere expression and said, "Among your teammates, there are a few whose realms aren't particularly high. I reckon that they will float in the Duchun River for a longer time." Everyone was speechless. Is Lord Saint not joking? Mu Xingchen also coughed and said, "Since that's the case, let's do as the saint said and rest here for 3 days." Very good. The Son of God nodded and turned to look at Arbor's expressionless face. "Miss Jojo, what are you doing? Why did it become like this?" Arbor let out a long sigh. "It's a long story. Go and rest first." "Who told you that?" "Whoever said that was an idiot." Sir Jojo snorted inwardly and complained in a small voice. Emolian couldn't help but turn her head. She felt that this little fellow's act of pretending to be old was especially interesting. Holy Sun Miyan and the others were indeed extremely tired and nodded. Fortunately, this was originally a temporary gathering place for the natives, so they had set up quite a number of tents. They didn't take them away when they left. Thus, Holy Sun Miyan and the others had a place to stay. Arbor watched Holy Sun Miyan and the others enter their respective tents before turning to look at Emolian. "Do you think he's pretending?" "That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."